Chapter 63. Chun Mei and Dong Shui received approval from the Lin clan. The next morning, they dressed up carefully and left the sewing room with 2 small bags. On the way, they stopped to say goodbye to familiar maids. Master Ho doesn't have a single woman by his side. I heard that all the maids in the early years were all. One of them made a gesture of cutting her throat and warned, "You have to be careful. Master Ho isn't that easy to serve. It's hard to say whether this job is a blessing or a curse." The other person nodded in agreement. Yes, everyone calls Master Ho the living king of hell. Every day he goes out clean and always comes back with the smell of blood. The maids in the laundry room are most afraid of washing Master Ho's clothes. They often carry a basin full of blood and pour it out. It's scary. I heard that Master Ho's aura is so gloomy and terrifying because he has killed too many people. The vengeful spirits around him don't disperse all year round. You too should be more careful. The young maid who was very close to them sneered, "Enough, don't say the grapes are sour. It's because Master Ho doesn't have a woman by his side that Chun Mei and Dong Shui have a future. Which man isn't lustful?" Master Ho didn't say anything before because Miss 3 was the head of the family. He couldn't let his sister touch a woman, right? This time, it's Madam's turn to arrange it. He will naturally accept it. After saying that, she took their arms and said in a flattering tone, "Sisters, don't forget to help your younger sister when you are rich in the future." Chun Mei and Dong Shui pursed their lips and smiled. Their cheeks were flushed, looking very beautiful and pleasant. It wasn't that they hadn't heard the rumors outside the Fu. What about killing people like Flax, being cold-blooded and ruthless, and not recognizing his own family? In their eyes, Master Ho's unusually handsome face and monstrous power could not compare. It was said that wealth came from danger. If they were lucky enough to become Master Ho's first woman, what else could they not have in the future? The two of them were calculating and guarding against each other. They swayed their small waists and walked to the front yard with small steps. The group of maidservants sent them off with envious, worried, and mocking gazes. Today was the day off. It was rare that Yu Pinyin didn't have to go to the yamen. He carried his sister to pay respects to the matriarch first, then brought her back to the study to practice calligraphy. Yu Xiang sat in front of a slightly short desk and wrote a word. He glanced at his elder brother who was leaning against the window and studying the Go record. He wanted to say something but hesitated. "Stop looking. No matter how much you look, you have to finish practicing the calligraphy. You should calculate how much homework you've missed." Yu Pinyin sneered without looking up. Yu Xiang put down the brush and complained, "Brother, I only know a few words. Are you going to teach me to be a great scholar? I don't have that talent. Look at little Joer. She's only 12 years old and she doesn't need to study anymore. She eats, drinks, and plays all day long, living a happy life. It wasn't easy for me to take care of the family, so you should let me relax for a few days. Do you want me to play Go with you?" Yu Pinyin's lips curved slightly, but his words were full of disdain. The 9th princess can play shamelessly in front of the emperor in order to play truant. You should also play shamelessly in front of your brother. Also, your Go skills are too bad. You don't count when I give you 10 moves, but you take back 3 moves after 2 moves. How about I play with my left and right hands? Thinking of little Jiao, playing shamelessly in front of the emperor, Yu Xiang felt embarrassed. He face-bombed and sighed, "If you want to talk, just talk. Why do you have to expose my past? I'll just write." The study quieted down again. Half an hour later, Yu Xiang knocked the brush against the inkstone and shouted, "Today's homework is finished. Brother, come take a look." Yu Pinyin put down the Go record and walked over to take a look. He shook his head and sighed. "How come you haven't improved after 4 years of teaching? You have form but no spirit, and your strength is weak. Even writing a greeting card is embarrassing." Yu Xiang shook her sore wrists and angrily said, "I was born with this much strength. How can I reach the point where I can penetrate the back of the paper? Brother, you're forcing me too much." Yu Pinyin smiled. He took out a piece of white paper and spread it out. He hugged his sister on his knees and held her small hand that was holding the brush. He gently said, "Brother will teach you. You can figure out how to use your strength. The strength of the handwriting doesn't depend on the person, but the angle of the brush and the speed of the brush." The elegant scent of sandalwood surrounded her. Strong arms wrapped around her armpits. Her back leaned against a broad and warm chest. She could faintly feel a steady heartbeat through the cloth. It was an indescribable feeling of snuggling. Even if Yu Xiang had a bellyful of complaints, she couldn't voice them out. She obediently nodded and then secretly glanced at her brother's side face with the tips of her ears red. Yu Pinyin pretended not to know. He held her small hand and wrote very slowly. A few lines of poetry spread out on the paper, telling a certain someone's indescribable feelings. The autumn wind is clear, the autumn moon is bright, the fallen leaves gather and scatter, the jackdaws are startled when they perch. Lovesickness knows when we will meet again. This night is embarrassing. Enter my lovesickness door. Know my lovesickness bitterness. Long lovesickness brings back memories. Short lovesickness brings back endless. After he finished writing, Yu Xiang murmured a few times. It was as if a small stone had been thrown into the lake of her heart, creating layers of ripples. There was also a subtle, indescribable feeling that quickly slipped through her mind. When she was about to grasp it, it dissipated like smoke. She blinked and her eyes were slightly absent-minded. She asked, "Why didn't you finish the last line?" There was indeed a last line. If I had known it would trip people's hearts, I would have never met them. Yu Pinyin carefully observed her expression. After a while he sighed and said, "The last line is quite inauspicious, so I might as well not write it. How could they not know each other? Then where should she place her love in this life?" Yu Xiang nodded blankly. Just as she was about to change the topic, two graceful maidservants came in from outside the door. They had exquisite makeup on their faces and were carrying parcels in their hands. They were twisting their small waists and squatting to salute. Their voices were as mellow as trickling spring water. Reporting to Master Ho, "Madam ordered us to come and serve you." The maidservant in the aqua blue robe smiled charmingly. "My name is Chunmei." The maidservant in the emerald green robe quickly glanced at Yu Pinyin and said shyly, "My name is Dong Shui." Soon after, they said in unison, "Madam ordered us to help you wash up in the morning and evening, and to serve you brush and ink during the day. Master Ho, if you need anything in the future, please instruct us." Yu Pinyin raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything. The blush on Yu Xiang's face quickly faded. She said coldly, "You two don't need to serve me here. Go back where you came from." Chunmei and Dong Shui had the Lin clan's support and wanted to take a gamble. Unexpectedly, they squatted in place and didn't move. As they replied, they looked at Master Ho with pitiful eyes. "Reporting to Miss 3, this is Madam's order. We don't dare to disobey. Moreover, Master Ho doesn't have any maidservants to serve him. It's inconvenient." Yu Xiang coldly interrupted the two. "You call it inconvenient because he doesn't have any maidservants to serve him? Do you think all the guards and manservants in the courtyard are dead? Didn't you hear me tell you to scram? Do you want me to order people to drag you out?" Yu Pinyin, who had been silent for a while, slowly opened his mouth. "Xianger, why are you chasing them away?" The two maidservants were pleasantly surprised, but Yu Xiang looked at him with a stunned expression. After a moment of silence, she suddenly threw the brush in her hand to the ground. Thick black ink stained her hand, and she tore the rice paper on the table into pieces. She angrily said, "I'm not writing anymore. You can stay if you want. I'm going back. Let go of me." As she spoke, she kept struggling, and her eyes gradually turned red. Yu Pinyin hurriedly held her body and waved his hand at the two guards standing at the door. The guards stepped forward and dragged the two maidservants, who didn't have time to hide their surprised expressions, away. Yu Pinyin forcefully held the crazy tigress in his arms and asked in a low voice, "Why are you throwing a tantrum? Even if you want to chase them away, you should at least give Big Brother a reason. Tell me that your attachment to me isn't a childish possessiveness, but a clear love between a man and a woman. A reason? What kind of reason could Yu Xiang give? Say that my world only has you, and your world will have concubines and children, and then you will naturally forget about me? In order to monopolize you, in order to avoid the foreseeable future, I don't dare to let anyone near you?" She knew that her thoughts were morbid, and she couldn't resort to words, but she would rather kill herself than turn back. She desperately blinked, trying to hold back the rapidly secreting tears, but she didn't succeed. She could only use the back of her hand to wipe away her tears. She angrily said, "There's no reason, I'm just this unreasonable. Let go, I don't want to see you. You always lie to me." Pinyin was hesitating whether to directly expose her identity or to deepen her attachment to him. He was in a dilemma, and when he looked down he couldn't help but laugh. He saw that the little girl's face was not only covered with tears, but also smeared with ink from her fingers. She looked very pitiful and very funny. Laugh, laugh, laugh. Yuxiang became more and more indignant. She accused, I only hear the laughter of the newcomers, but I don't hear the tears of the old. You heartless man. What did this have to do with? Pinyin couldn't hold back anymore. He wiped his sister's tears and blew her nose while laughing loudly. Silly girl. Where did the newcomers and old come from? Older brothers, newcomers and old friends are all you. Only you. Quickly look, I've already sent those 2 girls away. In the future, I won't let them step into the front courtyard. He pinched his sister's chin and made her look at the door. He continued to coax her, don't cry, you're breaking older brother's heart. Older brother only likes you. Tears hung on her eyelashes, blurring her vision. Yuxiang tried hard to open her eyes. Sure enough, when she saw that there was no one at the door, she slowly stopped sobbing. She wanted to laugh through her tears, but she felt that it was too embarrassing. She only pursed her lips and glared at her older brother. Pinyin held his sister's cat-like face and laughed for a long time before he ordered Lulu to bring in a basin of water. He carefully wiped the ink off her face and hands. He sighed helplessly in his heart. Forget it, if I can't get an answer I won't ask. I really can't stand her tearful appearance. Little vinegar jar, why are you so jealous? Pinyin pinched his sister's fair and clear cheeks and scolded her in a low voice, but his tone was full of satisfaction. Yuxiang originally didn't want to pay attention to him, but when she met his deep and tender eyes, the corners of her lips unconsciously curled up, and she softly snorted like a cat. Pinyin loved her coquettish look so much that he would never get tired of it. He held her in his arms and rubbed her for a long time. Then he kissed her on the top of her head, which was filled with fragrance, like the wings of a butterfly. Lulu poured some water and stood in the corridor, scratching his heart and lungs. He was about to clench his teeth and urge Miss to go back when Mama Ma hurriedly ran over and said, the old lady asked Master Ho to hurry over. Eldest Miss is making a scene. What's the matter? Lulu hurriedly asked. Hey, what else could it be? Marriage. Marriage? With the Fong family? No wonder eldest Miss is making a scene. The Fong family is already ruined. How can she get married? Lulu put down the basin and hurriedly ran in to report. The author has something to say. I've been sick recently, so my dear boyfriend came all the way to see me. He went on a date today. I'll post the list tomorrow. After posting the new chapter, I went to take a shower and put on makeup. I dressed up beautifully. La la la, O greater than over equal to E. Opus. Babe has always said that my pace is slow and the plot is slow. After deep reflection, I realized that it's not the plot that's slow, it's me that's slower. So I've decided to start a double update from Christmas Eve until the end of this article. If I can't do it, I'll go eat *T. Screenshot as proof. As for before Christmas Eve, because I have to hand over the house on December 31st, I have to look at the furniture and appliances these days. I'm a bit busy. Chapter 64. Although the matriarch was dissatisfied with the Lin clan, she usually didn't pay much attention to her. If she hadn't come to the main courtyard to make a fuss last time, the matriarch wouldn't have used such vicious words to reprimand her. After the Lin clan returned home, they reflected for several days and developed an indescribable fear of the matriarch. Therefore, they also understood that the military order they made that day was a huge weakness. If she made a mistake, the matriarch definitely wouldn't be as lenient as before. She would definitely take out a lawsuit and divorce letter to drive her out. Where could she go if she left the Marquis household? Her biological younger brother was unreliable, and her elder brother had already become enemies. She was a woman with a large amount of dowry. She would only be eaten alive by people with bad intentions. This hidden worry would appear from time to torment her, but she didn't dare to confide in her daughter. She only repeatedly warned her daughter not to make any mistakes and to please the matriarch in Pinyin. At first, Yu Miaoqi was patient enough to agree, but seeing her mention it every day, her heart began to feel uneasy. In addition, the person she sent to investigate Shen Yuanqi replied that he was from Lingnan. Because of the death of his parents, the Shui clan adopted him. Although they couldn't find the time when he was sold as a slave, it sounded like the person in her memory. There was also a vivid portrait attached. Yu Miaoqi opened the portrait and looked at it. Immediately, her face turned pale with fright. Even if this face was burned to ashes, she would still recognize it. Wasn't this the family Shen's legitimate son, Shen Yuanqi? He actually had such good fortune. Yes, the family he sold himself to was surnamed Shui. They were a famous noble family in the Lingnan area. Not only were they rich, but they also had some influence in the court. As long as he wasn't a pedantic person who didn't know how to adapt, with this kind of background, sooner or later he would be able to make a name for himself. Moreover, he was extremely intelligent and talented. Yu Miaoqi burned the portrait. She felt as if her heart was being licked by the flames. The pain of the burning was indescribable. How could the heavens be so unfair? Not only did they give the Chan siblings exceptional looks, but they also gave them great luck. They were always able to turn danger into safety and come back from death's door. However, he was extremely stingy towards her. Behind every twist of fate was a hidden misfortune, making her tired of dealing with it. That night, she drank a pot of old wine until she was drunk and barely managed to fall asleep. The next day, she went to greet the old lady with a throbbing head. The old madam could not bear to see the mother and daughter pair. She nodded slightly and was about to chase them away when the Lin clan suddenly said, "Mother, Siyu is already 16 this year. It's time for her to get married, right? Which family are you going to book? I can help you with the arrangements." Siyu had been waiting anxiously for a long time. Seeing that she had taken the initiative to ask, she quickly gave her a grateful look and then looked at the old lady. Only then did old Madame Fu remember this. She sneered, "I didn't help her choose it. She chose it herself." Yangzhou Salt Transport Commissioner Si Yuntong's eldest son, Fang Zhichen, today's Tanhua Lang. Siyu shyly lowered her head. She did not know why, but these years Yu Pinyan's official position was getting higher and higher, and the power in his hands was getting bigger and bigger. The aristocratic families that interacted with the marquis household were getting fewer and fewer. In the past, Siyu could still receive a few visiting cards and interact with sisters of similar family background. These years she did not receive a single one. If she took the initiative to look for them, they would stay far away from her. Because Yu Xiang's legs were inconvenient, he did not like to receive guests. The Fu's door was tightly closed all day long. In order to accommodate her, the old lady cut off all contact with other families. After a long time, Siyu could not help but stay at home and play the zither and embroider, feeling sorry for herself. Because she was slow-witted, she did not know anything about the outside world. The fact that the emperor had massacred everyone in Yangzhou's officialdom had long been known to everyone on the street. She was still dreaming of a grand wedding with 10 li of red dowry. The Lin clan quickly glanced at their daughter and raised their voice, "Salt Transport Commissioner Si Yuntong? Or today's Tanhua Lang? This is a good marriage. Have you exchanged the marriage invitation and marriage contract?" Because she and Siyu were both people who did not care about worldly affairs, her words did not arouse any suspicion. "There is no marriage invitation or marriage contract. I was just about to send someone to Yangzhou to discuss the marriage." The old lady despaired of these two idiots. She hit the ground with her walking stick and reiterated, "Siyu, I'll ask you again. Do you really not regret it? Do you really want to marry into the Fang family? How can the important matters of life be treated as child's play?" Replying to old ancestor, "Granddaughter does not regret it." Siyu said word by word. "Very good. Before you send someone to discuss the marriage, I'll tell you something. You must be mentally prepared." The old lady poured a cup of hot tea and slowly said, "That Fang Darren was beheaded more than a month ago for dereliction of duty, corruption, and bending the law for personal gain." Although Fang Zhichen was not convicted, his scholarly achievements were used to redeem his mother. The Fang family's wealth was confiscated. That mother and son are now homeless and miserable, suffering from hunger and cold. They are waiting for your dowry to save their lives. Since you are so in love with him, I will fulfill your wish." At this point, the old lady did not care about Siyu's shock and absent-mindedness. She waved at Mama Ma. Have Fushan take people to Yangzhou. They must bring back the Fong family's mother and son intact. They are my Marquis Yongla's future in-laws. Do not neglect them. Mama Ma agreed in a low voice and was about to leave when Yu suddenly came back to her senses and pulled on her sleeve. She hurriedly shouted, "You can't go. You can't go." After shouting several times, she looked at the old lady suspiciously and asked, "Old ancestor, you must be lying to granddaughter, right?" Young Master Fong was appointed as the Tanhua Lang by the emperor, and was also appointed as the Zhizhou of Yangzhou. His imperial favor is comparable to that of the top scholar. If there really was a problem with his family, how could the emperor be so lenient? You must be lying to me. You are biased and can't bear to see your granddaughter live a good life. You are really old and muddle-headed. Towards the end, her expression gradually became deranged. She laughed and cried, scolded and shouted. Her appearance was very frightening. The peerless riches and honor that she had dreamed of for a long time turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. After her lover turned from an elegant young master to a criminal official in the blink of an eye, the huge psychological gap made her lose her composure. Moreover, she was seen as a joke by so many people. She even had the heart to die. The old lady did not ask anyone to pull her back, nor did she speak. She only waved at Mama Ma and ordered her to go find Master Ho. A blockhead needs to be hit with a heavy hammer. Otherwise, he can forget about being enlightened for the rest of his life. When Yu Pinyin came over with Yu Xiang in her arms, Yu was still shouting things like, "Impossible." It was as if she was unwilling to face reality. When she saw her eldest brother come, it was as if she had grasped at a life-saving straw. She hurriedly asked, "Eldest brother, the old ancestor is just scaring me, right? How could something happen to the Fong family? Young Master Fong just came in third place. His Majesty personally praised him." Yu Pinyin gently placed his little sister on the soft couch and sat down next to her. He tidied up his little sister's skirt and poured a cup of hot tea for her. Only then did he leisurely say, "I personally plucked Fong Lianxing's head off on the day Yu Miaoqi returned home." It was just a short sentence, but Yu felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She immediately sat paralyzed on the ground, unable to get up. After a long while, she finally cried, "Eldest brother, how can you be so cruel? You clearly know that I have an engagement with young Master Fong, so why didn't you show mercy and let his family go? You're harming me, ah. How can you not recognize your own family to this extent?" Yu Xiang nibbled on a pastry and drank a mouthful of honey tea. When she heard these words, she became unhappy and threw the pastry at her. She scolded, "Do you know what you're saying? You let older brother save the person that His Majesty wanted to kill. The Fong family's crime was cleared, but you let older brother bear the crime of bending the law for personal gain. Are you afraid that His Majesty doesn't suspect older brother enough? Older brother already has countless enemies in court. If he's not careful, he'll be impeached by the imperial censor. He's always been in charge of legal matters, but you let him bend the law for personal gain. Do you know what crime Fong Lianxing was beheaded for? It was dereliction of duty and bending the law for personal gain. What do you mean by saying this? You want older brother to sacrifice his future and even his life for your marriage? Yu, do you know what your surname is? Who is your family? You traitorous, heartless and unscrupulous thing. See if I don't smash you to death." She only stopped scolding after smashing 3 or 4 pastries. Her cheeks were puffed up as she gasped for air. Yu Pinyin was originally a bit annoyed, but when he saw her indignant appearance, he was instantly overjoyed. He pursed his lips to stifle his laughter as he picked up the teacup and slowly fed her some water. Of her 2 biological granddaughters, one wholeheartedly schemed against her own family, and the other wholeheartedly sided with outsiders. She didn't know what kind of sin the family you had committed to raise these 2 things. Although Xiang'er wasn't her biological granddaughter, she was better than her biological granddaughter. She didn't waste this fate. The matriarch's terrible mood finally improved slightly. She looked askance at Yu, who was in a sorry state, and said, "It's said that when a girl is of age, she can't be kept at home. If she's kept, she'll become an enemy. You really have a deep grudge with your older brother. That's fine. I'll marry you to the Fong family tomorrow. You can go back and prepare." Yu no longer held any hope in her heart. She wiped away the crumbs of pastries on her forehead and shouted, "Don't, old ancestor. Granddaughter knows her wrongs. Please forgive me this time. The Fong family has already been ruined. You can't marry me over. Wasn't this what you begged for? How many times did I persuade you in the beginning? You can count on your fingers." The matriarch sneered. Yu Xiang secretly pulled out a file from the matriarch's palm and flipped through it. Sure enough, it recorded the information of unmarried men who didn't have high status in the capital but were of good character. There was also a small picture on each page. It was a matchmaking booklet. Sure enough, the matriarch was just scaring Yu Xiu. In fact, she had already found a candidate for her, and was just waiting for her to choose. If Yu Xiu's ambitions weren't so high and her eyelids weren't so shallow, her future days would be very comfortable. Let's not talk about the distant future for now. At the very least, she would be more comfortable than Yu Miaoqi, who was more ambitious. She was the female lead. In the future, she would marry the emperor. She just didn't know which prince she would marry. If it was the crown prince, it would be fine. If it was someone else, the marquis household would be in danger. Thinking of this, Yu Xiang's heart trembled. She pondered how to ruin Yu Miaoqi's marriage. Regardless of the plot, protecting her older brother was the most important thing. Her older brother had a close relationship with the crown prince and held a lot of power in his hands. If the other princes wanted to fight for the throne, their first target would undoubtedly be her older brother. The more Yu Xiang thought about it, the more worried she became. She couldn't help but look at Yu Miaoqi with a cold gaze. Yu Miaoqi also happened to look up at her. Her face paled and she quickly lowered her head. Although she was the true legitimate daughter of the marquis household, she didn't know why, but she always felt like she couldn't raise her head in front of Yu Xiang. Because of this, the resentment and unwillingness in her heart grew stronger day by day. Yu Xiu didn't have the mind to observe the undercurrent between the two of them. She only knelt on the ground and kowtowed, begging for mercy. At this time, she suddenly understood why the old matriarch and Yu Xiang kept asking her if she would regret it. It turned out that everything they said was true. It wasn't because they couldn't bear to see her doing well that they deliberately tried to deceive her. Would she regret it? Of course. She regretted it so much that her intestines turned green. She couldn't wait to turn back time. She wanted to kill the Pei clan who kept talking about how the Fong family was rich and how outstanding their son was. The author has something to say. Thank you to my rich friends, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. Chapter 65. The matriarch wanted to scare her, so she let her kowtow and admit her mistake without responding. She picked up the teacup and slowly sipped. Mama Ma brought over a new plate of pastries. Yu Xiang nibbled on them as she flipped through the booklet. From time to time, she would brush away the crumbs that had fallen onto the pages. Yu Pinyin caught a glimpse of a small portrait of a man attached to the booklet. His face darkened for a moment. He was about to reach out and snatch the booklet when his sister tilted her head towards the old ancestor. She pointed at a small portrait and mouthed silently, "This is not bad." The matriarch looked down and saw that it was the one she liked the most. The corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. Xiang'er was still the most down-to-earth and clear-sighted. Although he came from a poor family and didn't have a high official position, he had good morals and a generous temper. Furthermore, his family was simple and had strict rules. A man could only take a concubine when he was over 40 and didn't have a son. He could be considered a good match. If a girl were to marry into his family, there would be no in-laws to make things difficult for her and no concubines to annoy her. As long as she was able to conceive a legitimate son, her life would be extremely comfortable. Yu Xiang observed the matriarch's expression. Seeing the smile in her eyes, she knew what was going on. Instead, she felt envious of Yu Xiu. Yu Pinyin pursed his thin lips and pulled out the booklet in her hand. He quickly skimmed through it and his gaze stopped at the line, "A man can only take a concubine when he is over 40 and doesn't have a son." His little vinegar jar had probably chosen this person because of this point. After thinking for a moment, he smiled slightly and casually tossed the booklet to the side. It was enough to have Xiang'er in this life. He only needed to protect Xiang'er and live with her alone. He thought that in the future, he would definitely make her happy and satisfied. Yu Xiang glared at her older brother. She picked up the booklet that was about to fall and placed it on the Kong table. Yu Xiu was still begging for mercy, but Yu Miaoqi had already noticed the small movements above. She looked around the booklet and immediately knelt down to plead, "Grandmother, please have mercy and forgive my older sister this time. That Fong family has declined to such a state that I can't get married. If word of this got out, won't people laugh at me, Marquis Yongla?" Since the old madam didn't want Yu Xiu to marry into the Fong family, she would do her a favor. Anyway, when the Fong family's mother and son quarrel, Yu Xiu would have to marry even if she didn't want to. I, Marquis Yongla, have never been afraid of being laughed at. Let them say whatever they want. The old lady snorted. Yu Miaoqi continued to dissuade her. Grandmother, even if you don't think about the reputation of the Marquis family, you should think about my sister's happiness. Can you bear to see her marry into such a family and live in hunger and cold? It's not that I'm heartless. She was the one who made up her mind. It's not that I didn't try to persuade her, but she herself said that she wasn't interested in young Master Fong's family background, but his character. Since she felt that love was enough, I couldn't help but agree. The old madam didn't relent in the slightest. She was determined to teach Yu Xiu an unforgettable lesson. Yu Xiu had long since regretted her decision. She wished that she could break her head and make the old madam's heart soften. She immediately spoke the truth. Old ancestor, your granddaughter was wrong. Your granddaughter lied. Your granddaughter wasn't interested in young Master Fong's character, but his family's wealth. I was interested in his family's wealth. Now I understand the principle of wealth is like smoke and clouds. Cherish it as you go. You tried to persuade me several times before, but it was all for my own good. I was wrong, very wrong. Please forgive me this time. After she finished speaking, she kowtowed several times. Yu Miaoqi also kowtowed. When she straightened her back, she didn't forget to wipe Yu Xiu's tears. She seemed to empathize with her and felt pity for her. Yu Xiang coldly observed her actions and couldn't help but sneer inwardly. She knew that this person was the female lead. Her ability to stir up trouble was top-notch. As soon as she returned home, Yu Xiang ordered people to keep a close eye on her. How could she not know what she did to ruin Yu Xiu? Behind her back, her methods were insidious. On the surface she appeared gentle and graceful, but when she really sold Yu Xiu still had to help her count the money. Look, this idiot was so moved that she held her hands and cried. If she knew the truth, she would be angered to death. Of course, at the same time, Yu Xiang also learned that Yu Miaoqi's servant girl was secretly inquiring about the Zhuangyuan. However, there were many girls in the capital who were inquiring about the Zhuangyuan. Even the princesses frequently found excuses to wander around the Shui estate. She didn't take it seriously and only thought that this servant girl was in love. As a result, it took a long time before she realized that the person was actually her own brother. When the matriarch saw that Yu Xiu had already realized her mistake, her expression relaxed. She threw the booklet in her hand over. Take a good look. Choose one in 3 days and I will send someone to discuss marriage for you. If you continue to make excuses, you might as well not marry and go to the countryside to accompany your Yinyang in her old age. The Lin clan finally opened her mouth. Why haven't you thanked old ancestor yet? Yu Xiu suddenly came back to her senses and hurriedly kowtowed to the matriarch. Then she picked up the booklet and sat down with Yu Miaoqi's help. Her face immediately turned from deathly white to a purplish red. She finally realized that the matriarch was deliberately scaring her today. Otherwise, why would she prepare such a thick booklet? Presumably, she had already started looking for someone several months ago. Realizing this, the gratitude that had just risen in her heart turned into resentment. She unconsciously clenched her fists so tightly that the booklet crumpled. The matriarch's eyes darkened slightly. She sighed silently. Forget it. Sending her out is already doing my best. In the future I won't care if she lives or dies. How could each and every one of them be so ungrateful? Yu Xiang was still considering whether or not she should secretly help Yu Xiu. But seeing this scene, she immediately dispelled the idea. She raised her hand and used her handkerchief to cover the sneer at the corner of her mouth. When the Lin clan mother and daughter saw that the matter had been settled, they stood up to leave. However, they were stopped by Yu Pinyin. Yu Miaoqi, in the future, if you stuff people into my courtyard again, you can go back to where you came from. My prefecture, you can't afford to provide for a great Buddha like you. Big brother, what are you talking about? Miaoqi doesn't understand. This was the first time that Yu Pinyin had clearly expressed his intention to drive her out of the Marquis household. She was so scared that her face turned white. No matter how many schemes she had, she couldn't come up with anything. The Lin clan mother was stunned. She immediately explained, Yandere, you've misunderstood. Those two people were sent by me. You're already 21 years old now. You should have a few people by your side who care about you. With just a few words, the matriarch understood that Madame Lin and her daughter had stuffed a bed warmer next to her grandson. She nodded and said, since it was arranged by your mother, you should accept it. Don't you know how old you are? In the past, when her granddaughter was in charge of the family, her grandson never opened his mouth. The matriarch's days had been too leisurely, so she had forgotten about such an important matter. Yu Pinyin's tone was mocking. You arranged it? You can take the initiative to think of me? Mother, don't joke around. Then he looked askance at Yu Miaoqi and warned in a low voice, you've only just taken over the household, yet you're stuffing people into your brother's side. You're reaching too far. The Lin clan mother and daughter were so ashamed and angry that they wanted to die. Only then did they realize that Yu Pinyin's impression of them had risen from indifference and alienation to loathing. When he didn't like someone, no matter what that person said or did, it was wrong. But this time the matriarch didn't feel that Yu Miaoqi was wrong. Although it was indeed inappropriate for a girl like her to meddle in her brother's affairs, it was also for the sake of the Marquis household's children. Just as she was about to say a few good words to have her grandson accept the person, Yu Pinyin cautiously said, old ancestor, don't forget how your grandson was poisoned that year. I didn't ask or investigate. I only begged a few times and they sent the person over. Do you think your grandson isn't dying fast enough? Moreover, there are so many confidential files in my courtyard. If one or two of them were to be leaked, the Marquis household would be destroyed. Therefore, your grandson can't accept a servant who I don't know the background of, and I don't dare to accept. Her grandson had been poisoned 3 times that year. The first 2 times they couldn't find the cause. It was only after they sent people to secretly monitor the situation that they found out that the person who poisoned her grandson was the personal servant girl who had taken care of him since he was young. As they continued to investigate, the matriarch was almost scared to death. The servant girls and manservants who were slightly closer to her grandson had all been secretly bribed. That year, those people were willing to go to such lengths just for a title of nobility. Now, her grandson was an official and had grasped the dark secrets of countless officials. If the woman sent to his side was a spy sent by someone, it wouldn't be a small matter. If it was light, her grandson's reputation would be ruined. If it was heavy, the prefecture you would be exterminated. The matriarch was fine before she thought about it, but once she thought about it, she was so frightened that she broke out in a cold sweat. Her hand that held the prayer beads began to tremble. Flustered and exasperated, she said, Lin clan, if you want to manage the household, I'll let you. But you're not allowed to meddle in the affairs of Yandere's courtyard. If there's a next time, get out of my sight. As Yu Xiang leaned over to pat the matriarch's back, she threw a mocking glance at Yu Miaoqi, who was fearfully admitting her mistake. Yu Miaoqi's originally pale complexion immediately turned ashen. The matriarch caught her breath and held her granddaughter's fair and tender hand. She sighed and said, Xiang-er is still the most reliable. When Xiang-er was managing the household, there weren't so many filthy things. An unmarried girl meddling in her brother's affairs. Who taught you this rule? You should have some face in the future. Go, go, go. Just looking at you makes me annoyed. The Lin clan mother and daughter kowtowed and apologized, then walked out with weak steps. When Yu saw that someone was suffering with her, her mood improved considerably. She hurriedly went forward to support Yu Miaoqi and even gave her a reassuring smile. The siblings stayed behind to accompany the matriarch for dinner. Taking advantage of the time when the matriarch returned to her room to change, Yu Xiang grabbed her brother's neck and kissed him heavily on the cheek. The loud smacking sound made Yu Pinyin chuckle incessantly. He hugged his sister and gave her a good rub. When the Lin clan mother and daughter and Yu returned home, they were both resentful and unwilling, but they didn't dare to cause trouble. Yu used all her strength to torment that booklet because none of the men in it were within her scope of choice. Those who were handsome had no wealth, and those who were wealthy had no looks. Those who were both handsome and wealthy had a lowly status, so she was really worried to death. Seeing that 3 days had already passed, she begged the matriarch to extend the deadline by another 5 days. The Lin clan mother and daughter were quiet. They either cultivated their moral character in the Fu, or went to the temple to burn incense and worship Buddha. The Lin clan originally planned to hold a banquet to introduce their daughter to the noble ladies in the capital, but Yu Miaoqi stopped them. She felt that it was best to spread her good reputation first before holding a banquet. This was the safest way. How could a chance meeting compare to a compliment? In less than half a month, the news that the prefecture Yu's second miss had returned home spread. This second miss had been fostered at Shuiyu Nunnery since she was a child. Her master was the abbot of Shuiyu Nunnery, Liao Kong Shirtai. Once the news came out, everyone in the capital knew that the second miss had an affinity with Buddha. She was quiet, elegant, gentle and beautiful. She was the polar opposite of Yu Xiang, who had a perverse temperament. In reality, most of these people hadn't even seen Yu Miaoqi's face. The reason why they held her in such high esteem was because they wanted to give face to Liao Kong Shirtai. Although Shuiyu Nunnery wasn't as prestigious as Zhenghua Temple, it was famous for its seclusion. It didn't receive pilgrims and was known for its strict rules in the Great Han Dynasty. Shuiyu Nunnery's Liao Kong Shirtai was the older sister of the current emperor. When she was only 8 years old, she comprehended Buddhism on her own and became a monk. In the Great Han Dynasty, she was known as the reincarnated Buddha. Her prestige wasn't below that of the Kuhai monk, and her status was even higher. How could the disciple she chose not have an extraordinary aptitude? Therefore, before the noble ladies in the capital met her, they had already sketched out the glorious image of Yu Miaoqi and believed it without a doubt. In reality, Yu Miaoqi wasn't actually Liao Kong Shirtai's disciple. She had only heard of Liao Kong Shirtai's legend, and knew that Liao Kong Shirtai had gone out to sea to travel. The nuns in Shuiyu Nunnery had never paid attention to worldly affairs and only focused on cultivation. That was why they dared to tell such a big lie. Even if someone deliberately tried to verify it, they still wouldn't be able to enter Shuiyu Nunnery. When Yu Miaoqi returned home, she heard from the nuns in the nunnery that if it weren't for Commandant Yu, their nunnery hadn't received pilgrims for more than 30 years. Later, she also made some inquiries and found that Shuiyu Nunnery had indeed closed its doors and didn't allow anyone to enter or leave. Because of this, her past was firmly covered up. Regarding this, even if she was extremely unwilling, she had to admit that Yu Pinyin did consider her. It was just that he didn't consider as much as Yu Xiang did. However, her resentment towards Yu Pinyin didn't lessen because of this. She would never be able to forget the 2 times she had been imprisoned. The author has something to say. There are actually people who want to see me eat shit and also want to see me write 2 chapters. You guys are too evil. I recommend going to see these 2 girls for a drink. Ha ha ha. I guarantee that I won't be able to eat for 3 days. Thank you to my rich friends, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original version. Moi. Chapter 66. Yu tossed and turned for 8 days before deciding on a candidate. It turned out to be the nephew of the matriarch's eldest sister-in-law's brother. Although their relationship was a bit distant, they usually had contact with each other. This person was 20 years old and had just been crowned. He had already participated in the imperial examinations twice and failed both times. However, his appearance was very elegant and handsome. In addition, his father was the chancellor of the imperial college. Although he had no real power, he was very noble. This person was the least talented of all the candidates. If it weren't for the fact that he was related to the matriarch and came from a scholarly family, the matriarch wouldn't have considered him. However, Yu chose him because although he didn't have any talent, he was the most handsome among them and had the most prominent family background. Her snobbish eyes couldn't see through the barrier in the end. She planned to walk this path to the end. The matriarch looked at her deeply and finally took the booklet. She quietly sighed, "Fine. Since you've chosen him, I'll send someone to discuss the marriage." Yu Xiang leaned next to the matriarch and flipped through the pages as she said, "This isn't good. He just joined the Guanfu and already has a group of concubines. With Yu Siyu's blockhead, wouldn't she be tortured to death? This is good. Although he's a bit older and comes from a poor family, he doesn't have any concubines. He doesn't even have a servant girl. In 4 years, he climbed from the head of the Tai Pu temple to the position of a magistrate in the capital. He relied on his own ability and is reliable. 6th-ranked magistrate? If Mimi likes him, why don't you marry him yourself? Yu Siyu sneered. Yu Xiang glanced at her and didn't bother to respond. The matriarch was angry and slammed the table. Enough. Don't treat Xianger's good intentions as ill intent. If this person wasn't a relative of my eldest sister-in-law and had invited an Iceman to propose marriage, I wouldn't have considered him either. Fine. Since you like him, I won't stop you. However, if you get wronged after marrying him, don't tell me. Go back and prepare for the marriage. She still had to rely on the matriarch to arrange the dowry. Yu Siyu didn't dare to argue and resentfully left. The matriarch immediately sent people to discuss the marriage. In the afternoon, they exchanged marriage invitations. The next day, after finding someone to examine them and felt that they were suitable, they set up the marriage contract. In just a day and a half, Yu Siyu's marriage was decided. In the end, Yu Siyu was still unwilling to give up. She locked herself in her room and refused to eat or drink. When Yu Miaoqi heard the news, she personally made a box of pastries and went to visit. You should at least eat some. If you hurt your body, other than yourself, who else would feel sorry for you? Yu Miaoqi held a piece of cake and sent it to Yu Siyu's lips. Yu Siyu took a bite and sighed with tears in her eyes. In this family, only my younger sister treats me the best. Sister, why don't you come back earlier? We sisters can spend more time together. What's the point of returning sooner or later? In any case, I'm superfluous. Yu Miaoqi's short sentence caused Yu Siyu to burst into tears. For a moment, she hated Yu Xiang and the matriarch even more. Yu Miaoqi continued, although I just came back not long ago and don't know much about the affairs of the mansion, I know that with my brother's power, you can at least marry into a count's mansion, a marquis mansion, or even a duke's mansion. But why are the candidates that grandmother found for you all shameful? Could it be that because Yu Xiang can't get married, she doesn't want you to marry well because she's afraid of poking her lung? Do big brother and grandmother treat you as family? Will I be the same in the future? She tried her best to sow discord. Even if Yu Siyu was to get married, she had to make her hate Yu Xiang, Yu Pinyin, and the matriarch. Perhaps she would be of use in the future. As expected, Yu Siyu was extremely angry when she heard this. She also felt that the two of them were in the same boat, so she hugged Yu Miaoqi and cried bitterly. Just at this moment, the Qiu clan rushed into the room. She didn't have time to pay her respects and shouted, "Eldest miss, it's not good. Feng Zhichen is making a fuss outside. He said that he exchanged tokens with you a long time ago and privately pledged to marry you. He wants to sue the Marquis household for not keeping our promise and for one woman to marry twice. The old lady wants you to quickly go to the main hall to see her. You should hurry and tidy up." What? Exchange tokens, privately pledged to marry, one woman to marry twice? Nonsense, there's no such thing. Yu Siyu suddenly stood up and shouted. Because she was so shocked, even her voice changed. But in the next moment, she remembered the night they had met privately and confided in each other. Her angry expression turned into a guilty conscience. Even if the exchange of tokens wasn't true, privately pledging to marry someone couldn't be wrong. At that time, she really did have such thoughts and was caught red-handed by Yu Xiang. Now, even if she had 100 mouths, she wouldn't be able to explain herself. She was suddenly on the verge of collapsing. She was so shocked that she couldn't speak. With Yu Miaoqi's help, she barely managed to stabilize herself and staggered towards the main courtyard. Yu Miaoqi lowered her head slightly, and the corners of her mouth curved into a sly smile. At the same time, the Feng family's mother and son were making a big fuss at the entrance of the residence. The Pei clan kept saying that they had a marriage agreement with the Marquis household and would only propose marriage in the future. Feng Zhichen even took out a pink doudou embroidered with Yu Siyu's name and showed it to the crowd. He said that Yu Siyu had personally given it to him as a token of their love and ordered him to keep it close to his body. The crowd suddenly burst into an uproar, and countless erotic scenes appeared in their minds. They were amazed by the unrestrained nature of the young miss of the Marquis household. The bodyguards guarding the gate wanted to go forward and grab the two, but the two quickly ran into the crowd, shouting as they ran, "Who doesn't know that Marquis Yongla is the living king of hell? He kills people without blinking an eye. If we are caught by you, how can we come out alive? We won't go, we definitely won't go. If the Marquis household is sincere, then come to my house to propose marriage and make this marriage agreement. Otherwise, we will go to the Marquis household and sue the Marquis household for one woman marrying two men and corrupting private morals. We are temporarily staying in the small courtyard opposite the fortune pastry shop in 100 Blossom Well Alley. Fellow villagers, please be our witnesses. If we die an unnatural death, we will definitely be silenced by the Eternal Joy Marquis Manor." The two ran and shouted, causing the crowd to point and gossip about the Marquis household. Seeing this, the two bodyguards could only give up on the idea of arresting them and go back to report to the old lady. Yusiu had just taken half a step into the threshold when she heard the old lady sternly shout, "Shameless thing, why aren't you kneeling down?" Yusiu's legs went soft and she knelt down. Then she went forward on her knees, kowtowing as she tried to explain, "Old ancestor, I really didn't exchange tokens with him. You must believe me. If you didn't exchange tokens, then why didn't you privately pledge to marry?" The old lady's face was ashen. "How many times have I told you? Why don't you listen to me? If you were willing to listen to a few words from me, how could you have ended up like this? You idiot! You've completely disgraced me, the Marquis Yongla." When she finished speaking, she fiercely threw the teacup on the ground, causing a loud bang. Yu Miaoqi hurriedly retreated a few steps and hid behind the Lin clan. She lowered her head, as if she was very afraid. Yusiu trembled like a sieve and shouted, "Old ancestor, granddaughter was possessed. Granddaughter knows she was wrong. You must not marry granddaughter off otherwise." Before she could finish speaking, an old woman quickly ran in and whispered something into the old lady's ear. The old lady's ashen face gradually became distorted and ferocious. After she waved the old woman away, she gritted her teeth and laughed, "Good, good, good. You really are a shameless evil creature. You even gave away a personal item like your undergarment. You don't know, right? Just now, Feng Zhichen took out your undergarment and showed it to all the old and young men on the street. In less than half a day you became famous. Are you happy now?" When Yusiu heard this, she felt all the blood in her body rush to her head, almost bursting her already muddled brain. She immediately jumped up and screamed, "What undergarment? When did granddaughter ever give him an undergarment? Old ancestor, he's framing me. I've only met him once in private and exchanged a few words with him. I've never given him anything." She suddenly thought of something and revealed an expression of relief. She stepped forward and hugged the old lady's legs. She hurriedly said, "Yu Xiang was also there that night. Yu Xiang knows best what happened between Feng Zhichen and I, old ancestor. You'll know if you call Yu Xiang over and ask her. Get someone to call her over." She did prepare a keepsake for Feng Zhichen that night, but it was a high-quality jade pendant, not an undergarment. If Yu Xiang hadn't appeared in time, she would have given it away. Now that she thought about it, it was really a blessing in disguise. There was only one thing, and that was that Yu Xiang had to tell the truth. Thinking of this, Yusiu's heart, which had just been relieved, was lifted high again. She regretted always going against Yu Xiang. If she held a grudge against her, she could have knocked her down the abyss with just a few words. The old lady kicked her away and coldly snorted, "Why did you call Xianger over? To sully her ears? Do you think there aren't enough people who know about your scandals?" Yusiu fell to the ground, her heart dead. She didn't expect the sound of a wheelchair turning outside the door, followed by a clear voice. "Xianger came uninvited. Please forgive her, old ancestor." She was pushed to the old lady by two strong women. She didn't mix any personal feelings with her statement. "Since older sister asked me to be a witness, I'll be a witness." That night, older sister only exchanged a few words with Feng Zhichen and didn't exchange any keepsakes. As for the private pledge of marriage, it was a bit interesting, but I happened to interrupt, so it didn't happen. Feng Zhichen's actions are to ruin older sister's reputation in order to get close to the Marquis family. His actions are despicable. Old ancestor, you mustn't let older sister marry such a person. Yusiu was stunned. She didn't expect Yu Xiang to speak up for her. Yu Miaoqi pinched the Lin clan. The Lin clan seemed to wake up from a dream and slowly said, "But now that things have gotten out of hand, if we don't let Siyu marry him, how are we going to deal with it? Are we really going to kill that mother and son? The entire capital has its eyes on the Marquis family. If something happens to them, won't Yandere be attacked by the imperial censors? Not only can we not touch them now, we have to protect them and resolve this matter in the shortest time possible. As for whether Siyu is innocent or not, there's no point in arguing about it now." The Lin clan's words were very reasonable. The old lady revealed a thoughtful expression. Yu Xiang also didn't speak. Only Yu Siyu's increasingly rapid breathing could be heard in the hall. She went forward on her knees and struggled desperately. "No, old ancestor, you can't let your granddaughter marry him. Don't forget, your granddaughter just got engaged and has a husband's family. My husband's family is also related to you by marriage. How are you going to explain this to them?" Just as she said this, Wan Qiu came in with a small booklet. He stuttered as he reported, "The old lady, the Li family returned eldest Mrs. marriage certificate and engagement letter. They said that they didn't dare to accept such a daughter-in-law for fear of tarnishing their family's reputation." Yu Siyu felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She was completely speechless. She was like a dying fish that had sunk into the mudflat, desperately puffing out her chest in an attempt to find a way to survive. Suddenly, a series of light laughter sounded. It was Yu Xiang's merciless ridicule that cut her into pieces. She regretted her past actions. Look at older sister's taste. The first one is despicable and shameless, and the second one is treacherous, kicking a person when he's down. I already told you not to be blinded by the riches in front of you. Why didn't you listen? Today's ending is also because of older sister's own doing. Pitiful, sad, but also hateful. Chapter 67. The matriarch closed her eyes and leaned against the couch. She didn't say anything, but she pressed her temples with her thumb. It was obvious that she had a headache. The mother and son of the Fong family had made a big deal out of it, so she couldn't touch them. The Li family was a scholarly family, and they cherished their reputation the most, so they quickly broke off the engagement. The easiest way to solve this problem was to marry Yu Siyu off and send her far away from the capital. But she was still her own granddaughter. How could she push her away when she knew it was a trap? The matriarch couldn't make up her mind. It was better to wait for Yandere to come back first. Yandere would definitely have a way. Thinking of this, her expression softened. Yu Miaoqi was paying close attention to her expression. She guessed what she was thinking and immediately tugged at the Lin clan. The Lin clan first scolded Yu Xiang, then ordered people to send the delirious Yu Siyu back. Her expression was gentle and kind like a good mother. But when she turned back, she immediately pleaded, "Mother, the matter has already gotten out of hand. It's better to quickly send people to appease the mother and son. Aren't they just after Yu Siyu's dowry? Let's send a small sedan chair over today, and give them a few hundred taels of gold and silver. Let's make them leave quickly. Mother, what do you think? As long as they stay in the capital, our Marquis household won't have a day of peace. How many people will laugh at us behind our backs?" The matriarch seemed to be moved by her words. She thought that her grandson was already busy enough. As an elder, she should take care of these matters and not let her grandson be distracted. Just as she was about to agree, Yu Xiang said, "There's no hurry. Brother will always have a way. Let's wait for him to come back first. Our Marquis Yongla's daughter can't be wasted." As soon as she spoke, the matriarch seemed to have found her backbone and nodded in agreement without hesitation. The Lin clan gritted their teeth in anger. Yu Miaoqi lowered her eyes and smiled secretly. Let Yu Pinyin personally deal with the mother and son of the Fong family? This was perfect. The second basin of dirty water that he had prepared would have a place to splash. She helped the members of the Lin clan back to the main room, then took a box of expensive bird's nest to the east courtyard. Sure enough, she saw Yu Siyu lying on the bed, silently crying. She looked as if her heart had died. "Sister, you have to pull yourself together." She hurried over to Yu Siyu and helped her up. She asked a maidservant for a soft pillow behind her back. She lowered her voice and said, Aren't you hurting your loved ones and delighting your enemies by acting like this? Why don't you think about who will be the happiest if you collapse? Naturally, it's that bitch Yu Xiang. You seemed to come alive when she heard this. She pinched the brocade quilt so hard that it started to crack. Exactly. Yu Miaoqi gently patted the back of her hand and continued, I believe that Jie is innocent and definitely wouldn't do such a thing. But how did her sister's undergarment end up in Fang Zhichen's hands? Who secretly gave it to him? His family has already fallen to the point where they can't even afford to eat, so where did they get the money to travel to the capital? They even rented a large courtyard with 3 entrances on 100 Blossom Well Lane. There are many tricks involved. Jie, please think about who you've offended that would harm you like this. You can't continue to be depressed and fall into that person's trap. When she finished speaking, she picked up the scissors as if she didn't mean it and gripped it tightly in her palm. She seemed to empathize with Yu and choked out, It's too bad that I just returned home and don't have any foundation. Otherwise, I would definitely help Jie find that person and restore Jie's reputation. With a crisp crack, the handkerchief in her hand was torn into 2 pieces and fluttered to the ground. Yu's eyes flashed slightly. She discreetly snatched the scissors back and turned to comfort her. Good sister. It's good that you're considerate. I'll seek justice for myself. You're not her opponent. Jie knows who it is? Could it really be? Yu Miaoqi pretended to be shocked as she pointed towards the south courtyard. Who else could it be if not her? Could it be the old ancestor? You have to be careful after I leave. She's very sinister and vicious. Yu advised Yu Miaoqi patiently. Then she ordered the maidservant to send Yu Miaoqi back. She changed her outer robe and combed her messy hair. Then, she hid a pair of scissors in her sleeve and went to the southern courtyard. The Chiu clan members saw the murderous look in her eyes. When they returned to the room, they discovered that a pair of scissors was missing from their sewing box. They hurriedly took a shortcut and ran to warn her. Yu stepped into the small courtyard with a heart full of resentment. She saw a group of old women and servant girls holding wooden planks used for flogging and glaring at her like tigers watching their prey. Her legs quickly turned to jelly. She forced herself to slowly walk into the room step by step. However, she saw Yu Xiang leaning on the couch and eating melon seeds. Her black and bright eyes lightly glanced at her. Her gaze was 3 parts pity and 7 parts sharpness. The Chiu clan members knelt at her feet and sneakily shrank into a corner. Good, it's you again, you old dog. Do you think that Yu Xiang is easy to get along with? She eats people up without spitting out the bones. Once you're no longer useful to her and find out about her dark secrets, she'll immediately kill you. You understood everything. Her face twisted as she cursed. She wanted nothing more than to skin the Chiu clan alive. That's enough. The Chiu clan is loyal to their master. It's just that you don't appreciate their kindness. Yu Xiang straightened up and slowly patted the shells of melon seeds off her skirt. She sighed and said, Throw away the scissors in your sleeves. Otherwise, I'll have them break your arms. Do you believe me? As soon as she finished speaking, Tao Hong forcefully stomped the plank in his hand. The rest of the people looked over fiercely. Yu's fingers trembled as she threw away the scissors. The sharp blade almost pierced her foot. She was so frightened that she immediately broke out in a cold sweat. Yu Xiang leaned over with a languid smile on her face. She slowly said, word by word, Why don't you tell me why the Chiu clan knows about my dark secrets and why I must kill her? You murdered your own clansmen and ruined my reputation. You're selfish, vicious, and morally corrupt. You're simply inhumane. Yu was a little guilty at first, but she gradually straightened her back as she spoke. Tell me in detail. How did you murder your own clansmen and ruin your reputation? Yu Xiang placed one hand on the soft pillow and gently propped up her cheek. Her large eyes sparkled as if she was very curious. Yu was a little flustered under her burning gaze. She secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva and complained, You were the one who sent this old dog to steal Fang Zhichen's undergarment, right? You were also the one who ordered the Fang clan's mother and son to cause trouble in the capital, weren't you? You were the one who paid for their travel expenses and the rent for their courtyard, weren't you? In order to harm me, you've really schemed. Yu Xiang seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. She immediately laughed so hard that the smock draped over her shoulders slipped off, revealing half of her snow-white arm. She didn't care about how seductive her appearance was. Her face suddenly darkened as she beckoned Yusiyu with her index finger. "Come here." Her originally clear and melodious voice became a little hoarse, revealing a heavy and frightening sense of oppression. A few female servants with sticks stepped forward and made threatening gestures. The anger in Yusiyu's chest was like a deflated balloon that hissed and disappeared completely. All that was left was a heart full of fear. She was extremely unwilling, but she couldn't control her footsteps. She inched forward bit by bit and stared timidly at Yuxiang's gloomy face. Yuxiang leaned forward and looked at her closely. Her sharp gaze was like a boneless steel knife that cut into her exposed flesh. Just as Yusiyu couldn't take it anymore and wanted to retreat, Yuxiang suddenly hooked her lips into a sneer and ruthlessly slapped her, causing her to fall to the ground. Yusiyu was in pain. She covered her red and swollen cheek and growled, "You dare to hit me? You harmed me and now you dare to hit me? The heavens are watching from above. Sooner or later, you'll suffer retribution." As she spoke, tears flowed out. At this moment, she felt extremely helpless. After fighting for so many years, even if she didn't want to face it, she had to admit that she was indeed jealous of Yuxiang. But more than that, she was afraid. She liked to provoke her, but she was also afraid of angering her because she knew that she didn't have the ability to compete with Yuxiang. But now Yuxiang seemed to be really angry. Yuxiang was indeed bristling with anger. Her 5 fingers fiercely clasped Yusiyu's chin and lifted her face up. She said word by word in a deep voice, "Yusiyu, do you know that you're really stupid to the extreme? Today I'll give you a clear path. Your doo-doo was stolen by the second-ranked maidservant in your courtyard, Xue Chang, who was in charge of washing and hairpins. She handed it over to Mama Kim, who then handed it over to her second son-in-law to take care of in Yangzhou. Her son-in-law hired a refugee to persuade the Fong family, saying that they were under my orders to ruin your reputation, and that the bigger the matter, the better. Tell me, how did you offend Yu Miaoqi to make her set up such a vicious scheme to harm you for the rest of your life? Do you think that the antiques, jade wares, and even the farmstead you took from her were blown by the wind? On the surface, she's silent and obedient, but behind her back, she's itching to stab you to death." Yusiyu listened in a daze. Bolts of lightning flashed through her mind, and she suddenly understood the last few words. How did she offend Yu Miaoqi? Wasn't it because she found out about her past? That's right, if she married in the capital, if she couldn't control her mouth one day and publicized her past, how could Yu Miaoqi maintain her standing? What's more, Yu Miaoqi used this secret to ask for things from her time and time again, and each item was priceless. It would be strange if Yu Miaoqi didn't hate her. If the two of them were in different positions, Yusiyu would definitely be unable to eat or sleep in peace, and then rack her brains to deal with Yu Miaoqi. However, on second thought, she hesitated again. She put on a strong front and shouted, "Yuxiang, you don't need to drive a wedge between us. Chira is gentle and treats people sincerely. She would never harm me. On the contrary, it's you who constantly squeezes me and forces me." Before she could finish speaking, Yuxiang ruthlessly slapped her again. She used even more force to clasp her chin and sighed. "Why can't you wake up from your slaps? In this lifetime, you're living a life of helping others count their money even after being sold. For better or for worse, we've been together for so many years, so you should know a thing or two about my personality. I like to do things openly and don't like to play dirty tricks behind people's backs. Let me ask you, in all these years, have I ever tried to harm you behind your back?" A trace of blood slowly seeped out of the corner of Yusiyu's mouth. She frowned and thought for a moment, then reluctantly answered, "Never." "Have I ever ordered the servants to make things difficult for you?" After a moment of silence, she shook her head, "Never." "Have I ever embezzled your allowance?" The silence grew shorter and shorter, "Never." "Have I ever made you lose face in front of outsiders?" "Never." "That's because you would immediately make me lose face when you returned home." Yusiyu didn't think too much about it. She thought deeply about Yuxiang's questions and suddenly realized that other than the bit of unwillingness in her heart, her life had been very comfortable these years. Although the clothes she wore and the food she ate weren't expensive, they were still exquisite. She was much better off than the concubine daughters of other dukes, marquises and counts. Moreover, she had never suffered from the disdain of the servants. It was just that the people of the Cho clan were a bit annoying, but most of the time they would bow and scrape and bury themselves in work. They had never been insolent in front of her. Although Yu Xiang had a sharp tongue and would occasionally beat her down, she had never done anything behind her back. She liked and disliked. She never pretended to be herself. She wasn't like Yu Miaoqi, that two-faced trash. As the memories became clearer and clearer, Yu Xiu suddenly felt speechless. So it turned out that she had lived quite well these years. Yu Xiang let go of her bruised jaw and sneered, "Moreover, if I wanted to harm you, I would have urged you to quickly marry into the Feng family. Why would I stop you time and time again? If you had married into the Feng family, you would now be a married woman of the Feng family. You would also have had a share of the calamity of having your estate confiscated. A few days in prison would have been considered a light punishment. The heavier punishment would have been that you would be sent to be a slave and your dowry confiscated. Where did your arrogance come from? You came to my door with a pair of scissors. I treated you with good intentions, but you treated it as a sneak attack. Yu Miaoqi tried to win you over on the surface but tried to harm you behind your back. You were so close to her and your sisterhood was deep. Tell me yourself, are you stupid or not? What's the use of your pair of hands? You might as well dig them out." These words were simply too reasonable. She couldn't find any flaws in them. Yu Xiu muttered to herself for a long time. Suddenly, she covered her face and wept. She squeezed out a few words from her throat. "I'm stupid. I really don't know people well." If she had really stabbed Yu Xiang today, she was afraid that Big Brother would have immediately thrown her to the Feng family and cut off all contact with her. Yu Miaoqi was indeed a good schemer. Chapter 68. Yu Xiu hated Yu Miaoqi as much as she liked her in the past. She wasn't like Yu Xiang, who would explode on the spot. Instead, she buried it deep in her heart and schemed over and over again, then thought of a way to secretly take revenge. It was fine if she took revenge, but she actually wanted you to be grateful to her. To put it bluntly, this was like a whore trying to maintain her chastity. Yu Miaoqi was a whore, a complete whore. Yu Xiu thought of how affectionate she usually was when she called her sister, and she was so disgusted that she almost threw up the dinner she had last night. Looking at Yu Xiang's arrogant and despotic face, she didn't seem as annoying as before. She stopped crying and was about to get up and leave, but then she paused and asked in exasperation, "That's not right. Since you already knew about her schemes, why didn't you stop her earlier? If you were willing to help, would I have fallen to this state today?" Great. She was almost fooled. So this one wasn't a good person either. Yu Xiu was so angry that her whole body was trembling, and the little bit of good feeling she had for Yu Xiang was annihilated. Yu Xiang seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. She covered her mouth and laughed. Seeing Yu Xiu's face turn from green to purple and her nose crooked from anger, Yu Xiang slowly said, "These things were all caused by you and Yu Miaoqi, so why should I help? Let me ask you, if the two of us exchanged places, would you help me? I'm afraid that not only would you not help me, but you would also kick me when I'm down and make me even more miserable." Yu Xiu was stumped by the question and lowered her head guiltily. Indeed, not only would she not help Yu Xiang, but she would also step on her and watch her struggle in pain and despair. Even if she didn't want to admit it, Yu Xiang knew it clearly in her heart. Buddhism emphasizes karma and retribution. You will reap what you sow in the past. I will treat you how you treat me. You should be grateful that I didn't take the opportunity to throw you into purgatory. What right do you have to criticize me? Yu Xiang slowly leaned back on the soft couch, raised her fair and slender fingers, and admired the freshly applied nail polish under the sunlight. What she said was too reasonable. Not only was Yu Xiu unable to refute it, she actually felt grateful that she didn't take advantage of the situation. From the looks of it, Yu Xiang had a good personality other than his poisonous mouth. He had never schemed against others behind their backs. If he had been on good terms with her back then, he wouldn't have ended up like this. Yu Xiu's heart was full of regret, but she still forced herself to ask, "Even if you don't help me, you have to think about the reputation of the Marquis family, right? If the reputation of the Marquis family is ruined, which one of you will benefit?" Do you know the saying, "No egg can remain intact when the nest is overturned"? Yu Xiang chuckled. What does the reputation of the Marquis household have to do with me? Man said that I don't want to get married, and even older brother doesn't care. The only person in this household who still thinks about the reputation of the family is the old ancestor. Because of older brother's special position, the Marquis family didn't even have enough time to tarnish their reputation, so how could they care about maintaining a good reputation? If your reputation is good, you make friends with more people and you have more influence. What would the emperor want you for? In the blink of an eye, the butcher's knife will be hung over the Marquis Yongle. Thinking about how older brother massacred his family, Yu Xiu was speechless for a moment. In front of Yu Xiang, her tongue was just a decoration. Yu Xiang flicked her fingernails and continued, "You've also been taught a lesson, so I'll teach you a good lesson. In the future, don't just look at people on the surface." Buddha said. Lies, beautiful words, two tongues, evil mouth, killing people without blood, are all very evil. Take a look at how many of you Miaoqi's replies, and you'll understand what kind of person she is. Even so, you still dare to be so close to her. I really admire your courage. Yu Xiu carefully pondered these words and felt her hair stand on end. She thought, old ancestor always said that Yu Xiang's knowledge was extraordinary and her eyes were penetrating. Turns out that it wasn't an exaggeration. If I had 1 or 2 parts of her knowledge, how could I have been played around by that little slut Yu Miaoqi? Her anger and hatred were provoked to the extreme. She raised her head and asked, Yu Miaoqi schemed against me, but she also used your name. Why don't the two of us work together to deal with her? Yu Xiang narrowed her cat eyes and said carelessly, I don't need to deal with her. Older brother will naturally find trouble with her when he comes back. If you want to clear your name, think of a way yourself. Don't use me as a tool. Yu Xiu's face turned red. She tried to persuade her for a long time, but Yu Xiu didn't waver. In the end, she left resentfully. Her face no longer had the deep hatred from before. Instead, she looked a little ashamed. The Chou clan followed her out and explained in a low voice, Eldest miss, this servant was afraid that you would make a big mistake, so this servant ran to report it. Please don't hold a grudge against this servant. Although Miss Three's mouth is a bit poisonous, it's all for your own good. Just listen to her advice and don't be so stubborn. When the Marquis comes back in the evening, you should tidy yourself up and beg him. He's your older brother, so how could he not care about you? Although Miss Three's mouth is poisonous, it's all for your own good. The Chou clan had said this countless times before, but Yu Xiu had always snorted. It was only today that she truly understood that Yu Xiang had never harmed her. Instead, she had always been scheming for her. She could only blame herself for coming to her senses too late. She was too ashamed to speak, so she lowered her head and scurried away. After the master and servant had walked far away, Lulu couldn't help but say, Miss, eldest miss is right. If you had acted earlier, how could second miss still be alive? Yu Xiang shook her head and sighed. Do you think I didn't want to act? She hurt someone and then poured dirty water on me. I wanted to strangle her with my own hands. But now is not the time. She has something on me, something that could be used against me. That's right. Yu Miaoqi's background was her biggest worry, and it was the same for Yu Xiang. Not to mention whether there would be estrangement between her and Yu Pinyin after the mystery of her background was solved. The servants in the residence could drown her with a spit of saliva. At that time, if the Lin clan insisted on sending her away, she wouldn't have the face to insist on not leaving. Her identity as the legitimate daughter of the prefecture Yu was her biggest advantage, so she naturally had to grasp it tightly. If she pushed Yu Miaoqi too hard, she would reveal her background. It would hurt her by 1,000, but also hurt herself by 800. Yu Xiang would also fall into a very awkward situation. Therefore, it would be best if she could avoid bloodshed. Since it was something that could be used against her, Lulu didn't dare to ask any more questions. Tao Hong was so scared that he covered his mouth. The master and servants were quiet for a moment before they began to gossip again. However, a servant girl came in from outside and reported in a low voice, Miss Three Mama Cho asked this servant to pass on a message to you. Eldest Miss sent people to the countryside to catch snow. The matter is very big, so the main house must have been alerted. If the main house was alerted, they would naturally destroy the evidence. Mama Kim's second son-in-law was very good at handling matters. When he went to Yangzhou, He disguised himself so that no one recognized his face. When he contacted the Fong family's mother and son, he also hired a refugee. After he was done, he sent the refugee away. Yu Xiang ordered people to search, but they were a step too late. The refugee had already disappeared. The last place he was seen was by the Yangtze River in Guazhou town. It was very likely that he had been killed and then thrown into the river. Because Mama Kim's son-in-law had been in the army before, his methods were very ruthless. This time he used the excuse of breaking his leg and going home to recuperate. As soon as he came back from Yangzhou, he smashed his own leg. During this time, his younger brother pretended to be him and lay in bed moaning. The neighbors were all witnesses. Therefore, the snowfall became the only way to break through. This matter couldn't be said to be perfect, but it could be considered very beautiful. If Yu Xiang hadn't sent people early on to monitor the main house's every move, they really wouldn't have been able to find any evidence against Yu Miaoqi. However, Yu Xiang gave Yu Xiu the evidence that could be used against her, and she was still able to mess it up. She could be considered extremely stupid. Yu Xiang pressed the bulging veins on his forehead back down one by one. He gritted his teeth and said, "Pig teammate. There's no pig teammate who's worse than Yu Xiu. She didn't even know how to catch someone quietly. She had to make such a big fuss. If the person ran away, what would she use to clear her name? Miss, please calm down. Even if she messed up, would Master Ho suspect you? How could Master Ho not know what kind of personality you have?" Lulu quickly stepped forward and patted her back. Tao Hong quickly made a cup of honey tea and served it to her. However, when Yu Miaoqi heard that Yu Xiu sent people to catch the snowfall, she didn't panic at all. Instead, she covered her mouth and smiled slyly. The snowfall was her second trap. She had already sent people to write down Snowfall's theft on a piece of paper and stuff it into Yu Xiu's dowry. When Yu Xiu suddenly attacked, she thought that it was because she saw the note and didn't think that it was related to Yu Xiang. Yu Xiu sent people to catch the snowfall while standing guard outside the second door. When she saw Yu Pinion's tall figure against the light, she quickly knelt down and kowtowed. "Don't kowtow." Yu Pinion walked past her to the study and said calmly, "I don't care if you ruin the reputation of the Marquis household. I only know that my little sister can't marry that kind of despicable person. You should go back. This matter will be resolved in less than 5 days. After that, you can go to the countryside and hide for a year or 2 at most, or 7 or 8 at least. I'll bring you back to get married." Yu Pinion was a man of few words, but as long as he made a promise, he would do it. Yu Xiu cried tears of gratitude. She increasingly felt that she had been blinded by lard. How could she have thought that her big brother didn't treat her well? On the contrary, because of the rumors outside the Fu, she was afraid of him and alienated him. Later on, when they met, she would only nod and greet him. Yu Xiang wasn't affected in the slightest. No matter how much blood her big brother brought back, she would happily throw herself into his arms and chatter non-stop. Every time this happened, her big brother's face would reveal an indescribable gentleness. He was good to Yu Xiang because of Yu Xiang's sincerity, right? Yu Xiu suddenly felt that she had lived for the past 16 years in vain. It wasn't until today that she had truly opened her eyes to the world. Compared to the muddle-headedness of the Lin clan, she wasn't inferior. The mother and son of the Fong clan hurriedly left Marquis Yongla. They found a restaurant on the street and swaggered in. They ordered a table full of good dishes and a sumptuous meal. They also bought a lot of cloth, pastries and wine before leisurely returning to 100 Flowers Well Lane. The courtyard they rented wasn't large and the decorations weren't exquisite. In the past they would have looked down on it, but now it was like living in heaven. If they married Yu Xiu with the backing of the Marquis of Yongla, it wouldn't be a delusion to earn back the scholarly achievements they had lost. The mother and son drank as they imagined the future. They had long forgotten that person's words to them to quickly flee far away after marrying Yu Xiu. After drinking until he was half drunk, Fang Zhichen burped. He stood up and walked towards the door. "Mother, I'm going back to rest. You should also sleep early. Who knows, maybe the prefecture you will come early in the morning to discuss marriage." "I know. You can go." The Pei clan waved their hands and slowly knocked their heads on the table. Fang Zhichen returned to his room with his head heavy and his feet light. He closed the door and was about to roll onto the bed when he suddenly saw two dark figures, one sitting and one standing at the table. He was so frightened that he lost his voice and screamed. The Pei clan had already fallen asleep on the table. They didn't hire any servants in the courtyard, so his scream didn't attract anyone's attention. The author has something to say. Thank you to my rich friends, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original version. Moi. Chapter 69. Hearing the scream, the standing figure took out a match from his bosom and lit the candle on the table. The dim, flickering candlelight illuminated a bearded, murderous face. Fang Zhichen sucked in a breath of cold air. When he looked at the person sitting down, his pupils shrank rapidly, and he wished he could faint immediately. This person was not an ugly person. On the contrary, he had a handsome face blessed by the heavens, and a pair of powerful narrow phoenix eyes squinted slightly as he looked over. Fang Zhichen was so scared that he could not scream. He bent his knees and knelt down heavily, kowtowing several times before he found his voice. Master Ho, please spare my life. This commoner did not come to the capital to cause trouble. I was bewitched by others. Please spare my life, Master Ho. His father's head was personally taken by Marquis Yongla, so how could he not be afraid? Who instigated you? Yu Pinyin slowly asked. It was the residence's second Miss Yu Xiang. She sent someone to deliver 500 taels of silver to me and my son. She said that she could not stand Yu Xiyu's insolence in front of her, and that she would make her regret it for the rest of her life. She also said that if I could marry Yu Xiyu, she would give me another 1,000 taels of silver to take Yu Xiyu far away from the capital. In the future, if Yu Xiyu was disobedient, she could be tortured to death. The Marquis household would not take back the dowry she left behind, and it would all benefit me and my son. Fang Zhichen collapsed to the ground. He had confessed everything without any interrogation. Seeing Yu Pinyin's gaze becoming colder and colder, he hurriedly added, This commoner's family has already met with a great disaster. If it were not for the fact that we could not survive, we would not have agreed to do such a wicked thing. Moreover, Miss Yu Xiang also promised me and my son that she would not implicate us. She said that Master Ho was obedient to her, and that she only needed to help in the residence and this matter would be settled. Master Ho, this was all Miss Yu Xiang's idea. This commoner was also bewitched by her. Master Ho, please spare this commoner and his mother. If it wasn't for her, this commoner wouldn't have dared to offend you even if I had 100 guts. Before he could finish speaking, he was already in an extremely sorry state. Yu Pinyin was silent for a moment, and then he actually laughed in a low voice. His laughter was deep, but it was filled with the frost that could only be condensed in the depths of winter. Before he came, he thought that the mother and son of the Fang family had been driven by a political enemy, but he did not expect that there was a traitor in the Marquis household. Master Ho, he's slandering Miss like this, isn't he? The curly-bearded man pulled out the saber at his waist. When Fang Zhichen heard the sound of the blade being unsheathed, he was so scared that he wet his pants on the spot. The stench of urine mixed with the smell of alcohol filled the room. As long as the mother and son inexplicably disappear in the capital, tomorrow morning the emperor's desk will be filled with memorials to impeach me. He can't die, at least he can't die in the capital. Yu Pinyin shook his head as he took out a pair of thin gloves and slowly put them on. He walked over to Fang Zhichen and said, I'll give you a chance to live, but let's see if you know what's good for you. What chance? Fang Zhichen hurriedly asked. There's no rush. You keep mentioning Yu Xiang, and you still dare to pour dirty water on her. This Marquis will teach you what it means to live a life worse than death. Yu Pinyin laughed softly and stretched out his fingers. In an instant he dislocated Fang Zhichen's lower jaw so that he couldn't scream. Then he dislocated all the bones in his body one by one. After an hour, Fang Zhichen was as limp as mud. All the joints in his body had been dislocated. His chest rose and fell weakly, and he was almost out of breath. Yu Pinyin walked around him, then took off his gloves and casually threw them on the ground. He said faintly, Send someone to Yangzhou to investigate. Find the person who was in contact with the mother and son of the Fangs. The bearded man took the order in a low voice. After sending Master Ho out of the room, he picked up the gloves and burned them. Then he put Fang Zhichen's bones and joints back together. Naturally, it was another torment. When he walked out of the room, he saw 2 imperial bodyguards walk out from the shadows and silently follow him. Yu Pinyin smoothed out the creases in his clothes and sneered. "You Miaoqi, how dare you?" He didn't need to verify to know who the mastermind behind this was. Other than the two-faced and insidious Yu Miaoqi, there was no one else. Although Yu Pinyin knew that she was restless, he didn't send the dragon scale guard to monitor her day and night. The emperor hated it the most. He didn't even use the dragon scale guard to search for his relatives. Now, he wouldn't use it for a trivial internal strife. The people he brought today were all old subordinates trained during the war. Although they weren't as good as the dragon scale guard, they weren't far behind. They should be able to find out the truth in 3 to 5 days. Yu Pinyin stood outside the courtyard for a moment to disperse the unpleasant smell on his body. Then he slowly left. When he returned to the Marquis household, it was almost 3 o'clock in the morning. The lanterns were all extinguished, and the sky was so dark that one couldn't even see one's fingers. Yu Pinyin walked under the light. After a few turns, he arrived at the west wing and gently pushed the door open. The breeze carried the fragrance of flowers, which was different from the grass outside. It was rich but not smoky. After inhaling it, it was as if the tip of one's tongue was stained with a trace of sweetness. Yu Pinyin's cold and stern face unconsciously softened. He quietly walked to the side of the carved bed with the strongest fragrance and brushed aside the layers of curtains. His martial arts were excellent. Even in the dark he could clearly see things. He saw a red brocade quilt bulging. A sweet and charming face rested on the pillow. Her red lips were slightly open, inhaling and exhaling a lotus-like fragrance. Yu Pinyin stared at the young girl's pink lips. His face came closer and closer until the tips of their noses touched and their breaths intertwined. At this moment there was a rustling sound outside. A candle was lit shakily and was being carried closer and closer. Yu Pinyin didn't move, but he also didn't pull away. He supported the young girl's cheeks with his hands and stared deeply at her. "Master Ho." Lulu held an oil lamp and cried out in surprise. She immediately rubbed her eyes. "What is Master Ho doing? Is he kissing the miss?" She wanted to get closer and take a closer look, but she saw Master Ho tilt his head slightly and make a shushing gesture. Lulu didn't dare to move. She stood stiffly in place. At this moment, Yu Xiang half raised her eyes and muttered, "Brother? You're back?" She was still half awake, but her snow-white arms with a strong floral fragrance naturally wrapped around her brother's neck. She slightly raised her head and rubbed her brother's cheek. After a short while, she let go and wriggled in the quilt, leaving a space on the bed. The young girl's voice was originally delicate, but now it was a little hoarse from sleep. It also carried a kind of sweetness that couldn't be dissolved. Yu Pinyin's ears were numb. His heart felt like it was soaked in honey, up and down, unsettled. He slowly curved his lips. Under Lulu's incredulous gaze, he took off his outer shirt and boots and lay down beside the young girl. Before the age of 12, the brother and sister often rested on the same bed, so their movements were very familiar. As soon as one raised her neck, the other put his arms under it and gently held her in his arms and patted her. The young girl was originally petite. At this moment, she curled up like a cat and drilled into her brother's arms. She looked even more small and soft, very lovable. Yu Pinyin glanced at her and couldn't help but chuckle. His 5 fingers gently stroked her hair, and then he sighed with satisfaction. Yu Xiang felt very comfortable being stroked. Her eyelids gradually sank, but she suddenly opened them and asked, "Brother, did you go to deal with Yu Siyu's matter?" "Yes, it's done." Yu Pinyin nodded absent-mindedly. Yu Xiang made an "oh" sound. Her eyelids drooped twice, and she gradually fell into a dark and sweet dreamland. Her small hands tightly grasped her brother's collar. Lulu took the oil lamp and went out for a while. When she came back, her master had already fallen asleep. Master Ho was still lying beside her and hugging her. One hand was under his neck, and the other was twirling her master's hair and playing with it. Half of his handsome face was exposed by the candlelight, and the other half was hidden in the darkness. His expression couldn't be seen clearly, but his pair of long and narrow eyes were shockingly bright. Lulu secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. After thinking for a while, she finally dared to speak in a low voice. Master Ho, I've already informed the front courtyard. They've already prepared hot water and toiletries for you to go back. You still have to go to court tomorrow, so please rest early. This servant will take care of Miss here. Upinion didn't reply. Using his 5 fingers, he combed his sister's hair and carefully tucked her in. Only then did he slowly pull out his arm. Just as he was about to get up, he was pulled back. Only then did he realize that his sister was still holding onto his collar. Even in her dreams, she didn't loosen her grip in the slightest. Her attachment to him was beyond words. Upinion placed his hands on his sister's side and happily chuckled. He left a butterfly wing kiss on her forehead and the tip of her nose. Only then did he pull out a dagger from his waist and cut off his collar. He got off the bed and left. As he passed by Lulu, he paused slightly and looked at her. The tall figure disappeared into the night. Only then did Lulu let go of her breath. She walked with light footsteps to the bedside to take a look. She found that her master was holding onto a piece of cloth and sleeping very soundly. She even smacked her lips and muttered "Gidge." She was simply heartless to the extreme. Lulu wiped her face and sat blankly on the steps for a long time. Only then did she leave, rubbing her aching temples. Romantic affairs always spread very quickly. While Yusiyu was still ordering people to wantonly capture Shui, the matters between her and Fang Jichen had already become the topic of discussion for the people of the capital. There were also people who said that Marquis Yongla's family education was indeed poor. One was Yuxiang, arrogant and despotic, the other was Yusiyu, extremely lewd. Only the second miss, who had just returned, was untainted. Not only was she gentle and obedient, she was also noble and pure. She was indeed worthy of being the disciple of Liao Kong-nun. Although Liao Kong-nun had already given up the title of imperial princess, she was still a member of the imperial family. With her standing behind him, naturally no one dared to criticize Yu Miaoqi. After a full 3 days, Yusiyu finally captured Shui and hurriedly brought her to the matriarch without even asking. She said that she wanted to clear her name. She even invited the mother and daughter of the Lin clan, Yu Pinyin and Yu Xiang. It was as if she was going to hold a public trial. The matriarch sat upright on the couch. On the other side, Yu Xiang was leaning in her brother's arms, happily gnawing on a piece of tender cucumber. The members of the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi sat below the matriarch. One had a slightly tense expression, while the other looked angry but was actually full of anticipation. "Tell me, who ordered you to harm me?" Yusiyu angrily pointed at Shui, who was kneeling in front of the court. Chapter 70. Yu Xiang had been leisurely nibbling on a cucumber at first, but when she heard these words she froze. After a while she covered her mouth and chuckled softly. "I didn't expect that you would even throw dirty water at me. How bold. Did you come here today to seek death?" Her long, shapely eyebrows furrowed, and her charming face instantly became imposing. The servant girl was so frightened that she hurriedly leaned back. She quickly glanced at Mama Kim, who was standing behind the Lin clan, and resolutely said, "I already knew that Miss wouldn't let me live, so I ran out of the city. Since I've already been caught, I can only accept my fate. The old lady Miss 3 ordered me to do this. She said that she couldn't marry, so she wanted to ruin eldest Miss's reputation. She told her that even if she married she wouldn't have a good life. She gave this servant 100 taels of silver. This servant was greedy for money, so this servant stole eldest Miss's personal belongings and gave them to her." After she finished speaking, she turned to Yusiyu and heavily kowtowed. "Eldest Miss, you treated this servant well, but this servant did such a wicked thing and ruined your pure reputation. This servant can only apologize with death." Before she finished speaking, she lowered her head and slammed it against the doorpost. Sure enough, this servant was here to seek death. Because Yu Pinyin had cleared the area, there were no other people in the courtyard. Her confidants in the hall were also far away, so no one pulled her back. After a muffled sound, an ice-cold corpse and a large pool of warm blood appeared in the doorway. The strong smell of blood spread through the air. Because her confession was too unexpected, and her suicide attempt was too swift, the old lady and Yusiyu were all stunned on the spot. It wasn't until the pool of blood spread out that they cried out in alarm. Yupinyan immediately pressed his younger sister's face into his arms. When he looked down, he saw that there wasn't any shock on her face. Instead, she was propping up her neck and raising her chin, wanting to see what was going on. Yupinyan smiled and used his large palm to cover her eyes. He gestured to Mama Feng, who was standing behind him. Mama Feng was the only steward in the hall who was calm and composed. After she walked out, she called for 2 bodyguards to drag Snowfall's corpse away. Then 7 or 8 servants rushed in. They held highly absorbent dry cloths in their hands and squatted in a row to absorb the blood inch by inch. After they diluted the blood with a bucket of water, they sucked it dry again and then left. Before a quarter of an hour, the bloody scene had already disappeared without a trace. It was enough to show how well trained these bodyguards and servants were. Only then did Yupinyan remove his hand from his sister's eyes and wipe off the melon juice on the corner of her mouth with his fingertips. When the Lin clan was in charge of the family in their early years, they were used to big scenes. Even if they were timid, it was only when the matriarch mentioned her late husband and the divorce papers. Now they quickly calmed down and glared sharply at Yu Xiang. Yu Miaoqi's thoughts were vicious, but she was only 14 years old. Although she was the one who planned Snowfall's death, seeing it with her own eyes was completely different from what she imagined. The large amount of blood still seemed to be reflected in her eyes, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't wash it away. She hurriedly threw herself into the arms of the Lin clan and lowered her head to hide her guilty and frightened expression. It was not until the few servants had left that Yusiyu let out a scream, breaking the dead silence in the hall. The matriarch closed her eyes and gently twirled her prayer beads. She didn't seem to be shaken by the tragic scene in front of her, but the bulging veins on her forehead showed that she was trying to suppress her anger. Ever since she became a Buddhist, she hadn't taken a life for many years. She didn't expect that someone would be so bold as to use malicious ghosts and vengeful souls to pollute her peaceful place. As for what that girl said, she didn't believe half a word. If Xianger wanted to punish someone, she would definitely turn the world upside down. Everyone knew that she would use real swords and spears to do things openly. She would never use such underhanded tricks behind her back. After all, she was the child that she raised with her own hands. How could she not understand her character? However, before the matriarch could say anything, the Lin clan pointed at Yu Xiang and scolded, "You evil creature, you even hurt your own sister like this. Do you still have a conscience? Come, punish her according to the family rules." After saying that, she looked at Yusiyu and comforted her gently. "Don't worry, Siyu. After I punish her, I will definitely chase this evil creature to the countryside and let her live and die on her own. I will also seek justice for you." Yusiyu looked at her with astonishment, then looked at Yu Miaoqi, who was hiding in her arms. She was really shocked by the level of insidiousness and shamelessness of this mother and daughter pair. Snowfall was still a trap just to get rid of Yu Xiang. What a powerful method! She had already thought about it for 3 days and nights. How could she be fooled by the gentle appearance of the Lin clan's mother and daughter? Just as she was about to refute, she heard Yupinyan speak coldly. "Punish what family rules? In this Marquis Yongla, this Marquis is the family rules. If anyone dares to touch a single hair on Xianger's head, this Marquis will chop off that person's hand." As he spoke, his sharp gaze had already stopped on the Lin clan's arm. The Lin clan only felt a gust of cold air invade them. Even the layers of cloth couldn't resist it. "I can't wait to throw up last night's dinner. Who do you think you can hide those ugly things from? Even if Big Brother and Old Ancestor suspect anyone, they won't suspect Yu Xiang. You, on the other hand, are a two-faced, honeyed mouth and a sword in your belly. You're a complete slut, a whore. If Yu Xiang wanted to harm me, she would have done it 800 years ago. Why would she wait until now? Although she usually beats me up and scolds me, it's all for my own good. She's never harmed me. She's fierce and vicious, but she's definitely not sinister. She's different from a rotten animal like you." Yusiyu had been suppressing her anger for a long time. Now that she had exploded, the words she chose were all soaked in venom. She scolded Yu Miaoqi until her expression suddenly changed. Her breathing quickened, and she looked like she was about to faint. The Lin clan angrily scolded. "Shut up." Then, they hurriedly pulled their daughter into their arms and patted her. Yu Miaoqi's lungs were about to explode from anger. No matter how she racked her brain, she couldn't understand why Yu Xiyu would say such things. 3 days ago, she was clearly holding a pair of scissors and looking for Yu Xiang to settle accounts. She was chased out by Yu Xiang's servant girl with a stick. Why was she defending Yu Xiang today and opposing her so much? Why did her attitude change so much? Wasn't she very easy to fool before? She believed everything she said. This time there were witnesses and evidence in front of her, and there was even a human life involved. Why didn't she believe it? Countless question marks appeared in Yu Miaoqi's mind, but she was really guilty. For a moment she couldn't find any words to refute. She could only cover her face and cry. Cry? Other than crying and scheming behind people's backs, what other skills do you have? Oh no, I was wrong. You're also very good at acting. You're one person in front of people and another behind their backs. You think you're very capable and can play anyone in the palm of your hand. Let me tell you the truth. You're a peacock with its tail open. You look perfect in the front, but in reality you've already exposed your butt. Do you really think everyone doesn't know how smelly and ugly your butt is? I'm just too lazy to argue with you. Yu Xiyu still couldn't vent her anger. She kept cursing and swearing, unwilling to let it go. Yu Pinyin and old Madame Fu didn't care. One of them closed her eyes and the other closed her eyes. The Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi wanted to say a few words, but because she spoke too quickly, they couldn't get a word in. They could only grind their teeth and glare at her as if they wanted to eat her. Yu Xiyu glared back even more fiercely. Her reputation had been ruined by these two bitches. What was she afraid of? What filial piety and sisterly love? To hell with it all. It was the first time Yu Xiang saw Yu Xiyu go all out. She covered her mouth and was overjoyed. When she saw that Yu Xiyu's voice was a bit hoarse, she even took the initiative to pass her a cup of hot tea. Yu Xiyu was flattered and took it. While she was drinking tea, the Lin clan was about to angrily rebuke her, but they heard Yu Pinyin slowly say, "Mama Feng, please ask the two misses to leave. They're also tired. This marquis will take care of the rest." Yu Xiang quietly tugged at her brother. Seeing that he wasn't willing to compromise, she could only move to the wheelchair and let Mama Feng push him out. Yu Xiyu didn't dare to disobey. She put down her teacup and got up to leave. When they reached the courtyard, the two refused to go far. One sat by the pond to feed the fish, while the other stood under the banyan tree and craned her neck to watch. They were both waiting to see Yu Miaoqi's miserable appearance after her brother taught her a lesson. She had Marquis Yongla and Commandant Yu behind her back. Wouldn't she be able to get whatever she wanted if she married into her husband's family? Yet you like to humiliate yourself, always trying to get into those rich and powerful families. You'd rather lower yourself and grovel than live a happy life. Yu Xiyu listened very seriously this time. After a long silence she sighed and said, "I see. I have misunderstood ancestor and big brother. You're right. It's better to marry someone of a lower status than to climb up the social ladder. It's better to live a happy life. Marrying someone of a lower status doesn't necessarily mean you'll be able to live a comfortable life. You have to open your own eyes and choose a good, capable and responsible man. If you choose the right one, you'll have to rely on him for the rest of your life. Just like that young masterly you picked last time. He was completely useless, yet he still put on such airs." Yu Xiang sneered disdainfully. Yu Xiyu used to think that Yu Xiang's mouth was poisonous. Every word was like a needle and every sentence was like a thorn. After she calmed down, she realized that her words were like pearls and she never spoke nonsense. She couldn't help but laugh and say, "Younger sister is right. I should have listened to you long ago. Otherwise, I wouldn't have chosen a heartless animal." Because she had been with Yu Xiang for a long time, she didn't realize it herself, but others did. In the past, her personality was as fake and pretentious as Yu Miaoqi's. Over the years, she had slowly developed into a shrewish person. She wasn't cut out for fighting in the house, but she was good at scolding and making a scene. With this personality, if she married into a rich family, she might be schemed against, but if she married into a poor family, she would never be bullied. It was also Yu Xiang's method. The two of them exchanged a few heartfelt words, and felt that their relationship had suddenly become much closer. After Yu Xiang finished sprinkling a handful of fish food, she clapped her hands and said, "Go listen. After you listen, tell me. My chair is heavy. Older brother will hear it before you even get close." Yu nodded happily and sneaked closer to the main hall. As expected, Mama Feng and Mama Ma turned a blind eye to her. The two of them weren't guarding against her, but Yu Xiang. They were afraid that the two of them would quarrel inside and reveal their identities, which would only make her sad. The Lin clan made an impassioned speech to their son and old madam. There were two meanings to it. First, regardless of whether Yu was framed or not, she had to quickly marry Feng Zhichen and leave the capital to settle this storm. Second, Yu Xiang had harmed her sister and was vicious. Moreover, she wasn't of the family Yu's blood. She should immediately prepare a carriage and send her to the countryside estate, never to return in the future. Yu Pinyin and old madam listened expressionlessly, but Yu was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She couldn't wait to rush in and tear the Lin clan apart. On the day of the incident, she was grateful to the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi for protecting her. She didn't expect that these two bitches would turn around and stab her in the back. If she was lucky enough to stay behind this time, she would definitely make them pay the price. Then she thought about how Yu Miaoqi's weakness was also Yu Xiang's weakness. If she exposed Yu Xiang publicly, it wouldn't be good for her. She struggled for a long time before finally erasing the evil thoughts that surfaced in her mind. In the hall, Yu Pinyin put down his teacup and said coldly, "Are you done? If you're done, this marquis will say a few words." The Lin clan sat back down and reprimanded. "The evidence is conclusive. What else do you have to say? Are you trying to use your status to suppress others? You keep calling me this marquis. Have you forgotten who gave birth to you after 10 months? You unfilial son." "I've indeed forgotten. Who would remember something that happened so long ago? This marquis only remembers that this marquis was personally raised by the old ancestor. This life was saved by Xiang'er time and time again. Without her, this marquis wouldn't be here today. Don't try to use seniority to suppress this marquis. Don't you know that this marquis was the one who personally destroyed family Yu's concubine branch? This marquis' hands are stained with the blood of family Yu's people." He bent his knuckles and rapped on the table. The dull sound seemed to directly dive into one's chest and into one's heart, causing one to panic. The Lin clan was rendered speechless by his words. Yu Miaoqi's complexion was even more deathly pale. Her hands hidden in her sleeves began to tremble slightly. He could even kill his own clansmen. Yu Pinyin's brutality far exceeded her expectations. If he found out that she was the one who instigated everything, what should she do? Yu Miaoqi once again sank into deep regret. She regretted that she shouldn't have splashed dirty water on Yu Xiang. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been so many disturbances. Yu Pinyin didn't look at the expressions of the Lin clan's mother and daughter. He slowly opened his mouth. A month ago, there were two people in the Fu who asked for leave. One was Madame Jin's second son-in-law, and the other was a manservant, Zhou Tong, who returned to his hometown to visit his seriously ill mother. Because Xiang'er pitied Zhou Tong, who had no one to rely on, she gave him 20 taels of silver before he left. That Zhou Tong's body was found by this marquis a few days ago. His neck was broken and his body was abandoned in a mountain stream. Coincidentally, the subordinates this marquis sent to Yangzhou to investigate also found a body with a broken neck downstream of the Yangtze River. The way he died was exactly the same as Zhou Tong's. His actions were so clean and efficient. It was clear that the perpetrator had received special military training. If this marquis didn't remember incorrectly, Madame Jean, your second son-in-law was originally serving under this marquis. He was beaten 80 times with a rod and chased out of the military camp because of drunken murder. His usual method of killing people was to strangle their throats. That Zhou Tong's death was the third basin of dirty water that you wanted to splash on Xiang'er's head. In a few days you'll send people to search for the body and then frame Xiang'er to silence her. Mama Jin's head was covered in sweat and her limbs were weak. She stammered, "Master Ho, This servant didn't know anything about what you said. Yu Pinyin ignored her and continued. It's only been a month since she returned home. Yu Miaoqi still doesn't have the ability to make a servant girl loyal to her to death. This snowfall can be considered to have died in vain. A month ago she went out to buy things and was tricked by Madame Jin's daughter, who was traveling with her, into the wilderness. She was raped by Madame Jin's eldest son-in-law. He even tore off her doo-doo and said that if she didn't barter, he would publicize this scandal. Snowfall couldn't do anything. Even though she knew it was a hopeless situation, she still had to jump in. Yu Miaoqi, this marquis has always prided himself on his ruthless methods, but I didn't expect that a woman like you would be able to scheme against someone to this extent. You're very good. He turned his head and looked at Yu Miaoqi, who was sitting stiffly on the side. Although he was praising her, his expression was very malicious. The matriarch closed her eyes and stroked her prayer beads, incessantly chanting the rebirth mantra. Outside the door, Yu only felt a chill crawl from the soles of her feet to her scalp. She was so frightened that her liver and gallbladder were about to burst. 3 lives. She had easily taken the lives of 3 people, and she was only 14 years old. Thinking about what she was doing when she was 14 at most, she would cause a bit of trouble for Yu Xiang. She didn't even dare to think about harming people's lives, much less doing it. Compared to Yu Miaoqi, Yu Xiang was simply too pure and kind. Her previous actions of extorting Yu Miaoqi were equivalent to walking on the edge of a cliff. If she wasn't careful, she would be torn to pieces and consigned to eternal damnation. Yu forcefully rubbed her chest, and only then did she manage to suppress the panic in her heart. Unknowingly, her forehead was covered in sweat. In the hall, Yu Miaoqi pretended to be calm and said, "They're already dead, so isn't it up to Big Brother to say the words? I know that Big Brother dotes on Yu Xiang, but you can't be biased to this extent. The evidence is conclusive, yet you're twisting the truth to exonerate her and falsely accusing me. Big sister and I are very close, so what reason do I have to harm her? On the other hand, Yu Xiang." She paused, raised one hand and made a solemn vow. "I didn't do the things that Big Brother said. I dare to swear to Buddha. If I did it, may I be struck by lightning and fall into purgatory. I will never be able to be a human again, and I will be reduced to an animal for all eternity." The matriarch suddenly opened her eyes, and her gaze was like a torch as she looked at her. Yu Pinyin said calmly, "I think it's more appropriate to change 'I did it' to 'I ordered it.'" Yu Miaoqi pursed her lips and swore the oath again. She didn't believe in ghosts or gods, and only believed that her fate was in her own hands. She wouldn't be afraid even if she swore 100 or 1,000 times, let alone twice. The matriarch's gaze towards her became colder and colder, and blue veins popped out on the back of her hand that was pinching the prayer beads. It was obvious that she had reached the limit of her patience. Unfortunately, Jean sure didn't have a good eye, and she immediately retorted, "Master Ho, you may not know this, but my son-in-law took a leave of absence because he broke his leg. How could he possibly travel thousands of li to Yangzhou to kill someone? This matter really has nothing to do with Second Miss and this servant's family. Master Ho, please be clear about this. You're not like the Lin clan, someone who never leaves the house. You shouldn't be someone who doesn't even know what this marquis does." Yu Pinyin narrowed her eyes and sneered. "This marquis has solved countless cases, so how could I not be able to distinguish between old and new injuries? Oh right, I forgot to tell you, your son, daughter, son-in-law, grandson, maternal grandson, and all of your relatives are currently locked up in the marquis household's dungeon. Because they couldn't withstand the torture, they've already confessed everything that they should and shouldn't have confessed, and they've even signed their names. The reason why I waited until now to expose you was because I wanted to see more clearly what kind of person Yu Miaoqi was. You're truly worthy of being my, Yu Pinyin's, younger sister. You're truly vicious and merciless." As soon as these words were spoken, the entire hall fell silent. The only sound that could be heard was the chattering of the master and servant of the Lin clan. After a short while there was the muffled sound of silk bursting. The prayer beads in the matriarch's hand suddenly broke in two, and the sandalwood beads crackled and rolled in all directions. The author has something to say. "Thank you to my rich friends, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi." Your family Shen declined because of your futile attempt to curry favor with the crown prince. Your adoptive father died in vain because of your deceitful actions. Your adoptive mother originally wanted to send you home, but you snatched away the money to treat her illness. She died of anger while still alive. Let's not talk about the past for now. You knew that Shen Yuanqi was also in the capital, so you had people spread the news that he was once a servant in the Shui estate. You wanted to ruin his career. As the saying goes, the kindness of raising someone is greater than the kindness of giving birth. You could even abandon the Shen clan couple who raised you. You could also do such a thing to your older brother who grew up with you. Your heart is so vicious that it's devoid of conscience. You only care about pouring dirty water on Xiang Er's head. But you don't know that I have never suspected her in the slightest. It's time for you to tear off this hypocritical face of yours, so that you don't go around disgusting people. Yu Miaoqi was scared out of her wits when she heard these words. She thought that Lingnan was far away, and that most of the family Shen people were dead. She thought that no one should know about her past. Who would have thought that Yu Pinyin had investigated her thoroughly from the beginning? It was just that he kept it a secret. As such, his and the old lady's cold rejection of her could be explained. It was as if she was stripped naked in public. Yu Miaoqi was so ashamed that she wanted to die. She desperately hugged her shoulders with both hands and tried to curl up. Yu Siyu, who was outside the door, showed a terrified expression. She had a new understanding of Yu Miaoqi's sinister viciousness. She was not a beast. She was worse than a beast. The Lin clan was in disbelief at first and then crazily shouted. The Shen clan couple were the main culprits who harmed Cheer. What wrong did Cheer do to abandon them? They have long died. They are lucky. If they did not die, I will make them pay the price. You shut up. The old lady used her walking stick to hit the Lin clan's mouth until her front teeth chipped. Then she coldly said, "It is said that like mother, like daughter. With such a vicious mother like you, Shen Miaoqi naturally would not be any better. Evil beast, both of them are evil beasts." No, it's not like that. I did not do it. Eldest brother, I really did not do it. Yu Miaoqi was still struggling. The pale-faced Mama Kim suddenly knelt down and kowtowed. Master Ho, this matter indeed has nothing to do with Foreign and Young Mississippi. Everything was this servant's idea. This servant could not bear to see all of you indulge in Miss Xiang and abandon Young Mississippi. Also, this servant could not bear to see eldest Miss blackmail Young Miss every day. This servant set up this series of schemes to help Foreign and Young Mississippi. Everything was done by this servant. Because this servant was afraid that the family members would not help, this servant coaxed them to say that it was Young Miss and Foreign's orders. They are loyal and devoted to Young Miss and Foreign and naturally will not refuse. This servant is guilty. Master Ho, please punish. Yu Pinyin released the hand that was clamping Yu Miaoqi and turned to look at Mama Kim. Yu Miaoqi let out a huge sigh of relief and hurriedly threw herself into the Lin clan's arms. When the Lin clan saw Mama Kim take the blame, they were instantly dumbfounded. Their entire family had fallen into Master Ho's hands. Not a single one of them would be able to escape. They might as well die with them and fulfill their master-servant relationship while they were at it. Mama Kim composed herself and kowtowed again. It was all this servant's doing. Foreign and Young Miss were completely unaware. Master Ho, please punish this servant. Good, very good. Yu Pinyin smiled playfully and waved his hand. Since you're bent on seeking death, this marquis will fulfill your wish. As for who did this marquis has his own conclusions. Although this marquis is vicious and merciless, this marquis has not reached the point of personally killing his own mother and sister. The Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi both looked as if they had just survived a disaster. Yu Pinyin glanced at the two of them and continued, however, if there's a next time, this marquis definitely won't be merciful. I can't avoid chopping off a few restless hands. The Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi hurriedly hid their trembling hands into their sleeves. Mama Feng immediately sent people to tie up Mama Kim. Yu Pinyin urged the elderly madam to rest in the room, then ordered the Lin clan and their daughter to follow him to the dungeon. Yu Miaoqi hid in the Lin clan's arms and staggered towards the main door, but she heard the elderly madam slowly say, "Wait a minute. Untie the pouch at your waist before you leave. It's just a piece of scrap paper. Why are you still pretending to keep it? You're actually treating me like a monkey." Yu Miaoqi's entire body stiffened. She stared blankly for a long while before regaining her senses. She pulled off the pouch and handed it to Mama Ma, whose eyes were filled with ridicule. Mama Ma took out the scrap paper inside and unfolded it for her master to see. Then she casually tore it into pieces. After being tormented for so long, it turned out that she had been the one tormenting all along. Only then did Yu Miaoqi understand that Prefecture Yu was completely different from Family Shun. It was no longer a place where she could get whatever she wanted. She treated everyone else as fools and fooled them. But how could she have known that they were watching her like a clown? She had already lost all her face. Thinking of this, Yu Miaoqi's blood rushed to her head, and her already red and swollen cheeks almost burst open. She hid in the Lin clan's arms and shrunk her head as she walked out. As an official commander, no one knew better than Yu Pinyin how to destroy a person's willpower. He knew how to make the other party suffer a fate worse than death without hurting the flesh. Yu Miaoqi trembled. In the end, she opened her bloodshot eyes and looked at the person who had already been beaten in two. After 100 beatings, she raised her head and gasped for breath. However, she saw Yu Pinyin slowly roll down his rolled-up sleeves and carefully smooth out the creases. His tone was unprecedentedly gentle. As such, this marquis will no longer pursue your previous mistakes. These people are also at your disposal. Kill them or let them go, it's all up to you. Kill them or let them go. Yu Miaoqi sank into an even more painful struggle. If she let them go, these people would harbor resentment and know too much. They would definitely harm her in the future. If she killed them, she would appear to be heartless. However, in Yu Pinyin and the old madam's hearts, she had long become a heartless person. What was there to hide? In the end, her own safety was more important. After Yu Miaoqi made up her mind, she gritted her teeth and said, "Kill them." The Lin clan abruptly turned their heads and looked at her with astonishment. Mama Kim had raised the Lin clan from a young age. Her two daughters were like sisters to the Lin clan. If it were the Lin clan, they would naturally release them, give them some compensation, and let them leave the capital forever. In any case, they would have a way out. However, they didn't expect that their daughter would choose to kill them. No matter how biased they were towards their daughter, the Lin clan couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. Yu Pinyin chuckled lowly and clapped his hands, as expected of this marquis's younger sister. So ruthless. Since it's like this, then they'll all be beaten to death. You can continue to watch the execution. This marquis will leave first. He walked to the door and ordered the imperial bodyguards, "Don't let the two of them leave until the execution is over. If Yu Miaoqi refuses to open her eyes, use a bamboo stick to open her eyelids. There's no need to be polite." The imperial bodyguards solemnly acknowledged. Yu Miaoqi instantly went limp in her chair. Chapter 73. They watched the execution until the lanterns were lit. Only then did the mother and daughter support each other as they walked out of the dungeon. When they smelled the bloodless air outside, they breathed deeply as if they had come back to life. It was said that Yu Pinyin's methods were ruthless and treacherous. They finally experienced it for themselves. Although he had hit someone else, the scene of flesh and blood flying everywhere would be engraved in their minds for the rest of their lives. From then on, this experience would become an evil spirit that would haunt their dreams. Unless they died, they would never be able to get rid of it. The Lin clan knelt on the ground with a thud and began to bawl without caring about their image. She was remorseful, she was afraid, and she hated herself for being powerless. How could Yu Miaoqi not feel remorseful or afraid? But what was the point of feeling remorseful and afraid? Since everyone had already shed all pretenses of cordiality, she didn't need to spend so much effort to curry favor with Yu Pinyin and old madam. She could quickly find a more powerful husband to marry. Once she left Prefecture Yu, she would be able to live a better life. Yu Miaoqi gritted her teeth and pulled the Lin clan up. She staggered forward, only to see the two lanterns getting closer and closer. Yu Xiang's bright and beautiful face was hidden in the light, instantly illuminating everything around them. "Oh, you're out." She covered her mouth and chuckled. Was it fun inside? Yu Miaoqi ignored her and continued to support the Lin clan. When the two passed by each other, Yu Xiang stretched out her little finger and shook it slightly. Her contemptuous tone made people's teeth itch. You Miaoqi, you want to fight with me? You're still like this. Yu Miaoqi suddenly turned around and glared at her as if she wanted to eat someone. Seeing her pull out her horsewhip with a murderous expression, she hurriedly turned around and supported the dazed Lin clan as they quickly ran away. It was as if there was an evil spirit chasing after them. A string of bell-like chuckles sounded behind the two of them, following them like a shadow. In the main courtyard, old Madame was leaning on the couch. Her gaze was fixed on the empty space where a corpse once lay with a malicious expression. Take out my account book, she said slowly. Mama Ma took out a small book and a pen and handed it to her. Old Madame muttered as she wrote, I chased the Lin clan out of the Marquis household right after Siyu got into trouble. And I don't know what the outside world, but I can only endure it. She originally thought that after driving Mrs. Lin out of the house would be peaceful. But now it seems that this was not the case. Yu Miaoqi was even more troublesome. Out. Oh. Mammy Ma listened carefully and didn't dare to answer casually. The old lady let out a long sigh and continued, Look at her. She made such a vicious oath without any regard for ghosts or gods. She didn't differentiate between good and evil. Everything she did was for her own benefit. For her own sake, she killed the Shun couple, blocked her adopted brother's career, and ruined her sister's reputation. Won't she destroy the Marquis household in the future? The Lin clan. Even they can't get any true feelings from her. How can we enter her heart? It's fine if we don't enter her heart, but I'm afraid she hates us to the core. She'll take her revenge in the future. Mama Ma nodded sadly. Old Madame closed the account book and sneered. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have brought her back. Evil creature. She's really an evil creature. Mama Ma thought for a moment and asked, then should the old lady take back the funds? No need. Just send someone to watch them. We'll settle the score together in the future. This matter shouldn't be blown up, so I'll bear with it for now. Yu Miaoqi is very cunning. Even if there's obvious evidence, she won't admit it. She's much harder to deal with than the Lin clan. If she wants to cause trouble, I'll let her do it. When she causes trouble, I'll make her lose face. When that time comes, let's see who can take the blame for her. Old Madame's tone was malicious. Mama Ma nodded and didn't say anything else. 2 days later, another strange incident occurred in the capital. It was also related to the Fong family. Fong Zhichen was pacing back and forth outside a family's courtyard during the day. That family only had an orphan and a widow left, so they were very concerned about their family's safety. They chased after them with a stick and cursed, causing the neighbors to gather around to watch. Fong Zhichen took to his heels to run, but was stopped by a busybody who said that he must have stolen something. The busybody reached into Fong Zhichen's clothes and found many colorful undergarments. Everyone was dumbfounded. There was even an ignorant child who pointed at one of them and shouted, "Ah, that's my mother's." The corner of the undergarments was embroidered with her own name, so there was no way to deny it. The child's mother was scared out of her wits and immediately defended herself. I was wondering why the undergarments that were exposed to the sun disappeared every day. It's because they were stolen by this black-hearted dog. There were also many men who recognized the undergarments of their women. In order to protect their reputation, the women had no choice but to confess that their undergarments were stolen. The thief didn't steal property, but instead stole undergarments. Although it was rare, it wasn't the first time. 2 years ago, a thief was caught stealing women's stockings. After he was caught, he was beaten to a pulp, and the incident became very serious. Everyone was filled with righteous indignation. Just as they were about to beat Fong Zhichen to death, they coincidentally encountered a group of patrolling officers. They surrounded Fong Zhichen and after understanding the situation, they escorted him to the yamen for interrogation. This kind of slightly erotic anecdote spread very quickly, and in less than half a day, Fong Zhichen became famous. Then, this incident was connected to the scene he caused at the Marquis Yongla a few days ago. Everyone came to a realization. How was that a private gift between two lovers? It was clearly Fong Zhichen who stole the clothes of the Marquis household's young mistress, and conveniently blamed her for it. who told the Marquis Yongla to be a tall tree that attracts the wind. There were also women who were victims of the incident who spoke up for Yusiyu, and for a time countless people sympathized with her. The next day, the news of the prefecture Yu's young mistress committing suicide by hanging herself spread. There were even more people who sympathized with her, and the harsh words from before slowly dissipated. At the same time, the women in the capital no longer embroidered their own names on their undergarments. There were many women in the family, and they were afraid that they would get mixed up after washing, so they only made an inconspicuous mark on the pattern of the embroidery. In the end, Fang Zhichen was sentenced to 50 strokes of the cane and exiled for 3,000 li, and this matter was settled. Not long after, the rumor that the Zhuangyuan scholar was born a slave replaced the excitement at the Marquis Yongla, and became the newest topic of discussion among the people of the capital. Everyone was waiting to see how far this stunning Zhuangyuan scholar could go, and how the emperor would deal with him. Ever since the day Mama Kim was beaten to death, the mother and daughter of the Lin clan were both seriously ill and bedridden. The Lin clan was overly worried, and Yu Miaoqi didn't dare to show her face because of the red and swollen palm print on her face. During this time, many steward mamas went to report to Miss Three and the matriarch, but the two ignored them. Helpless, they could only go to the main room to look for the Lin clan. Yu Miaoqi originally thought that the power of being the head of the household would be taken away, but she didn't expect that it was still in her hands. She didn't care what the matriarch and Yu Xiang were planning. She only knew that by being the head of the household, she would be able to gain a lot of benefits. She would be able to accumulate connections and wealth before she got married, and after she got married it would be enough. Therefore, she put on a veil, forced herself to be alert, and dealt with the household affairs every day as if she wasn't affected by the framing incident at all. When the matriarch heard the news, she coldly laughed. She was even more afraid of this granddaughter of hers. She thought that in the future she definitely couldn't let her gain power. Otherwise, with her snake-like heart and rock-like temperament, the first person she would take revenge on after gaining power would definitely be the Marquis household. Yusiyu also fell ill, but she didn't hang herself like the rumors said. Instead, she fell ill because she was angered by the mother and daughter. After half a month of recuperation, she recovered slightly. After paying her respects, she immediately begged the matriarch to send her to the countryside. Although the rumors outside no longer called her lewd, but said that she was pitiful, her reputation was still damaged, and it wasn't good for her to show her face in the capital. The matriarch immediately nodded in agreement. The next day, Yusiyu was packing her luggage in her room when she heard the sound of a wheelchair turning outside the door. "You're leaving already?" Yu Xiang used her horsewhip to lift up the curtains. I'm going to the countryside to accompany my concubine mother." Yusiyu placed a large brocade box on the table and said with a smile, "Inside this box are all small items from my collection, such as jade, pearl hairpins, small terracotta figurines, and so on. Although they can't be compared to your precious items, they are all my beloved items. I'll leave them for you as a memento. TSK, who cares about your lousy things? Take them to the countryside and send them to the landlady." Yu Xiang's face was full of disdain. If Yusiyu heard these words in the past, she would definitely be fuming with anger. But now, not only was she not angry, but she could also detect the hidden concern in her words. Yu Xiang was like a hedgehog with spikes all over her body. She didn't seem to be easy to deal with, but after getting familiar with her, one would discover that she was just protecting her softest belly. This little temper was actually quite cute. Yusiyu smiled at her and didn't take back the brocade box. Instead, she continued to bury her head in organizing her things. "Who are you bringing with you this time?" Yu Xiang looked around. Aside from the Qiu clan servants, who were taking care of the boxes and cages, all the other servants were gone. The courtyard seemed extremely deserted. "Who else can I bring with me?" "Naturally, it's senior servant Qiu. How could those servants be willing to suffer in the countryside with me? In order to find a better place to go, they're all rushing to the main house to beg Yu Miaoqi." Yusiyu sneered. "I didn't stop them and simply let them all go. If they follow Yu Miaoqi, they might follow in Madame Jin's footsteps one day. I'll let them be happy for a while." Because Yu Pinyin had cleared the area, not many servants knew about what happened that day. They still thought that Yu Miaoqi was a gentle and docile person. Yu Siyu straightened up and looked at the busy Cho clan. She couldn't help but laugh self-deprecatingly. She didn't expect that in the end, the most loyal servants were the spies that Yu Xiang sent to her. How ironic. Yu Xiang ordered Tao Hong Lulu to push her into the room. She raised her eyebrows and said, "You're leaving just like that? You've lost your reputation, your husband, and your status. You're just going to leave like a stray dog with its tail between its legs? Why don't you think about who caused you to be in this state?" "Of course I remember. When I come back, I'll definitely torture that little whore to death." Yu Siyu spat on the ground. "You don't have money, power, or connections. What do you have to fight with her? Just based on the fact that you can spit farther than her?" Yu Siyu was instantly silenced. She glared hatefully at Yu Xiang. "No wonder all the noble maidens in the capital don't like you. Just based on your poisonous tongue, who can stand it?" Yu Xiang covered her mouth and laughed. She gave Lulu a look. Lulu immediately handed over the small box in his hand and explained, "This is the compensation that our miss asked for eldest Miss's emotional distress. Eldest Miss, please take a look." Yu Siyu opened the box and flipped through it. Her suspicious expression was gradually replaced by astonishment. She never expected that the deeds to the west of the city, Yuqing Street, King Ning Street, Flowerbird Lane, and the deeds to the 4 shops, as well as the deeds to the 200 hectares of fertile land, were inside the box. These were the Lin clan's most valuable assets. How did you get them?" Yu Siyu stammered. "I directly asked for them. What else could I do?" She had a guilty conscience, so she obediently gave them to me after scaring me a few times. On the other hand, Yu Miaoqi was rather unhappy. Since she's unhappy, I'm relieved. With these things, even if you go to the countryside, you'll still be able to live comfortably. People are forgetful. After a year or so, who will still remember your trivial matters? When the time comes, I'll help you find an honest and dutiful husband so that you can live well." Yu Xiang used the horsewhip in her hand to whip the edge of the table. Her expression was very indifferent. Yu Siyu was silent for a moment. She choked back her tears and said, "Thank you, younger sister. No matter what, I, Yu Siyu, will only recognize you, Yu Xiang, as my blood-related younger sister. I really do need these things right now, so it would be impolite to refuse. In the future, I'll definitely return them to younger sister 100-fold. As the saying goes, distance tests a horse's strength, and time reveals a person's heart." She finally understood this principle. Yu Xiang disdainfully glanced at her and reprimanded, "What are you crying for? Don't learn from Yu Miaoqi's shameless attitude. I'll be leaving now. Remember to kowtow to the old ancestor before you go out. You really angered her a few days ago." I won't. It's my fault." Yu Siyu hurriedly wiped her tears with her sleeve and followed her out the door. The author has something to say. "Thank you to my rich friends, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Mwax." Chapter 74. The main character of every book had an immortal body, unless it was a tragedy. The book that Yu Xiang transmigrated into wasn't a tragedy. As the main character, Yu Miaoqi naturally wouldn't be defeated so easily. She no longer had an image to speak of in front of Yu Pinyin and the matriarch, so she didn't go looking for them to hate her. Instead, she wholeheartedly focused on managing the household affairs. She knew that her only way out was to get married, so the household affairs could only be left in the hands of the Lin clan, and not handed over to the matriarch. Otherwise, the matriarch would interfere with her marriage. If she was asked to marry a 6th or 7th rank official like Yu Siyu, she wouldn't do it even if she was beaten to death. Her future husband's power and status would definitely be above Yu Pinyin's. Yu Miaoqi secretly inquired about the scope of authority of the Commandant Yu, and the various deeds of the Dragonscale Guard. Only then did she understand that in the entire Great Han dynasty, the only people with power and status above Yu Pinyin were the Emperor and the Crown Prince. Even the other princes had to be careful in front of Commandant Yu. Hearing this, Yu Miaoqi instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Immediately, she felt so ashamed that she wanted to die. She had such an all-pervasive power in her hands. Was there anything that Yu Pinyin couldn't find out? However, he didn't say anything. Instead, he asked one question after another, coldly watching her fabricate one clumsy lie after another to cover up the past. He must think that she was very laughable, right? Treating his own younger sister as a jumping clown to watch and play with, he was indeed as cold-blooded and heartless as the rumors said. Yu Miaoqi was filled with bone-deep hatred towards Yu Pinyin, the matriarch, Yu Xiang, Yu Siyu, and even towards the entire family Yu. She swore that she would become outstanding, and then ruthlessly trample on family Yu. However, as a weak woman, she couldn't participate in the imperial examinations, couldn't show her face in public, and couldn't make a name for herself. What could she use to fight against family Yu? After thinking about it for a long time, the only way was to get married, and it had to be to the crown prince. After the palm print on her face disappeared, Yu Miaoqi began to gather information about the crown prince and the other princes. She then urged the members of the Lin clan to quickly recover so that they could bring her out to socialize. On this day, the 9th princess suddenly came to visit Yu Xiang. She hunched her back and shrank her head as she walked behind the 2 palace maids. Her face was full of helplessness. Yu Xiang was sitting by the lotus pond feeding the fish. When he saw her, he hurriedly ordered Tao Hong to bring some pastries. Why did you lose so much weight? His chin is so sharp. Yu Xiang threw the fish food in his hand into the water. After wiping his fingers clean, he grabbed the 9th princess' chin and looked at her carefully. The 9th princess pursed her lips and looked very sad. What's wrong? Who bullied you? Yu Xiang raised his horsewhip. No one bullied me. It's a bit hard to say. The 9th princess looked around and sat down on a stone stool by the pond. She held her chin with both hands and sighed with a face full of worry. It's easy to say to me? Tell me what you're unhappy about to make me happy. Yu Xiang played with the horsewhip as he bit her ear and coaxed her in a low voice. The 9th princess looked like she was struggling. Her small mouth opened and closed, and she was about to tell the truth. However, she saw Yu Miaoqi leisurely walk over with a plate of fragrant pastries. She had her signature gentle smile on her face. The 9th princess' nose twitched and she looked straight at the plate in her hands. It was rumored that the 9th princess was a foodie. It was easy to please her by giving her a plate of unique pastries. Yu Miaoqi recalled the information she heard and saw that she had attracted the 9th princess's attention. The smile on her face became as gentle as water. The 9th princess was the crown prince's younger sister. It was rumored that the crown prince loved her like a treasure. If she was on good terms with the 9th princess, why would she worry about not being noticed by the crown prince? Thinking of this, Yu Miaoqi quickly walked over and gently placed the pastries on the stone table. She bowed and said, "This subject greets the 9th princess. This subject personally made a few pastries. The 9th princess, please have a taste." Who is she? The 9th princess pulled on her best friend's sleeve. Didn't I tell you in a letter earlier that I have a twin sister? Here, this is her. Yu Xiang disdainfully curled her lips. The 9th princess revealed a look of understanding. She then carefully sized up Yu Miaoqi and said in astonishment, "This can't be. There must be a mistake. You and big brother, you are both so beautiful, so why is she the only one who is so dull? Look at her eyebrows, they look like they don't exist. And those lips, they're so dry that they're cracked. Her skin is coarse and yellow, and she's as thin as ribs. A gust of wind could blow her away. Her appearance and bearing are completely different from you and big brother you. There must be a mistake." The 9th princess was obsessed with appearances. She was hopelessly obsessed with appearances. She would like anyone who was beautiful. Although Yu Miaoqi's appearance could be said to be elegant and refined, compared to Yu Xiang's unparalleled beauty, she instantly became like a tasteless soup. Moreover, she had been having nightmares every night recently. Her body had become extremely thin and her complexion was very unsightly. Her previous beauty was now reduced to just 1 or 2 points. She looked like a bean sprout with a big head and toes, very dispirited. Yu Xiang had always been proud of her appearance. When she heard these words, she wrapped her arms around the 9th princess's neck and laughed wildly. "Good ball, you're really my good little ball. You're absolutely right. I also feel that there must be a mistake somewhere. Otherwise, how could I become sisters with her?" When she said the last word, Her brilliant smile was replaced by deep disdain. Yu Miaoqi dug her palms until they bled. Only then did she manage to suppress the overflowing hatred in her heart. She pretended that she didn't hear her provocation. As the Crown Prince's most beloved younger sister, Yu Miaoqi naturally knew everything about the ninth princess. She knew that her brain was a bit slow, so her words were very direct. Just now, her words weren't deliberately targeted at her. She was just expressing her thoughts. She was clearly the true blood of the Marquis household, but there were always countless people who questioned her identity. That kind of sullen feeling that made one's heart feel like it was about to explode was not something a normal person could endure. If it weren't for the fact that Yu Miaoqi and the Lin clan looked extremely similar, who knew what the outside world would say? It was said that there were all kinds of strange things in the world. The appearance of the real and fake siblings could be considered strange. The siblings who were related by blood didn't look alike at all, but the siblings who weren't related by blood looked very similar. When the three of them stood together, Yu Miaoqi became the one who was picked up outside. The ninth princess didn't understand Yu Miaoqi's sullenness. When she saw that Yu Xiang was happy, she also became happy. She hugged her best friend with one hand and naturally reached out to grab some pastries with the other. When Yu Miaoqi saw this, she hurriedly moved the dishes towards her, causing her to smile sweetly. The happy expression on Yu Xiang's face immediately disappeared. With a flick of her sleeve, she swept the dishes off the stone table and said in a low voice, "You can't eat." A series of clattering sounds frightened the ninth princess. She stammered, "Dabu? Smells really good." Yu Xiang pried open her fingers and took away the last piece of pastry to throw away. She cast a sidelong glance at Yu Miaoqi and slowly said, "Some things look good and smell good, but are actually poisonous. Just like some people who look gentle and docile, but can actually push their sisters into a bottomless abyss and smash them to pieces with just a turn of the head. One may know a person for a long time without understanding their true nature. You mustn't eat the food that outsiders bring over." The ninth princess looked at Yu Miaoqi, who was on the verge of collapse, with a horrified gaze. Her two senior palace maids were both the most astute people in the palace. They immediately connected the dots between Yu Xiyu and Yu Miaoqi's ruined reputation a few days ago. Their impression of Yu Miaoqi instantly fell to the bottom of the valley. Although Miss Yu was unreasonable, she never spoke nonsense. Everything that came out of her mouth was 100% true. The ninth princess's personality was so pure. If she were to befriend someone like Yu Miaoqi, who knew when she would be schemed against until not even her bones would be left? Thinking of this, the two stepped forward and separated Yu Miaoqi from their master. Yu Miaoqi pretended to retreat in fear. Tears quickly gathered in her eyes, making her already thin and haggard face appear even more delicate and pitiful. Just at this moment, Alu, who had been released for a walk, fluttered down from the sky. She picked up the pastry crumbs on the ground and began munching on them. "Alu, you can't eat poisonous things. Hurry and spit it out." Yu Xiang threw a melon seed over, which happened to hit Alu's head. Alu didn't understand human language, but she rolled her eyes and spat out the pastry crumbs. She picked up the melon seed that her master had thrown at her and flapped her wings to fly away. The ninth princess giggled when she saw this. Yu Miaoqi's heart was filled with resentment, but she didn't show it on her face. She explained with tears in her eyes, "Younger sister, why are you making things difficult for me? I already said that I wouldn't compete with you for big brother and old ancestors' favor, so you don't have to be too guarded against me. However, mother is seriously ill and has handed over the power of managing the household to me, so I have to do my duty." The ninth princess is an honored guest of the Marquis household. As the host, serving a plate of pastries is only the most basic etiquette. "Younger sister, please don't think too much about it. These pastries are poisonous. Younger sister, you'll know once you find someone to test them. There's no need to distort the truth and slander me." Before she even finished speaking, her tears were already flowing. How could Yu Xiang fall for her trick? He immediately sneered, "Find someone to test them? Why go through all that trouble? Older sister can just pick one up and eat it for me to see. If it's poisonous, then you only have yourself to blame. If it's not, then I'll immediately apologize to you." The ninth princess clapped her hands and praised with a smile, "Good idea. Lotus seed cake has always been smart." Yu Xiang glanced at her with satisfaction. You want me to eat pastries on the ground? What do these two take me for? A pig or a dog? There should be a limit to insulting others. Yu Miaoqi really didn't have any intention of currying favor with the 9th princess right now. She only wanted to pounce on them and strangle them to death. Just as her eyes were filled with resentment, she saw the two palace maids step forward and glare at her like tigers eyeing their prey. She was frightened and immediately put away her hatred. She covered her face and cried. Yu Xiang actually laughed and sneered. I knew you would cry. Every time I expose your rotten deeds, you cry. Can't you change to a new tactic? I have a violent temper. Do you believe that my head hurts from crying? Be careful that I don't slap your face until it blossoms. Do you think I like to oppose you? If it weren't for you framing me time and time again, pouring basin after basin of dirty water on my head, I wouldn't be so guarded against you. You're just like a poisonous snake. Once you get close, you bite. Being bitten by you is my negligence. If I let you bite me a second time, I'd be stupid. She raised her horsewhip and slammed it on the stone table. The leather made a dull sound when it hit the hard object. Yu Miaoqi trembled. She didn't even bother to apologize and covered her face to escape. She was afraid that if she stayed any longer, Yu Xiang would expose all of her scandalous deeds. After provoking Yu Xiang, 9 out of 10 noble maidens would cover their faces and escape like this. There was even one who fainted from anger. The 9th princess had clearly seen this kind of scene many times, but she still didn't get tired of it. She clapped her hands and was overjoyed. Yu Xiang rubbed her head and warned her earnestly, do you see that? It's best to stay away from women who cry at the slightest thing. They can always stir up trouble for no reason. It's fine if they rely on you, but it won't be good if they rely on His Highness the Crown Prince through you. Chapter 75. After chasing away Yu Miaoqi, Yu Xiang said with a smile, Speak, why did you call me here? Today is my nephew and niece's 1-month celebration. Sister-in-law asked me to invite you to the celebration. I already received the invitation. Why did you have to come personally? Your face is so sharp, you must be hiding something, right? As they spoke, Tao Hong offered a plate of pastries and then left with the 2 palace maids. The 9th princess had been preoccupied with many things recently and refused to talk about it. Seeing that the soft flesh on her cheeks was about to give way, the Emperor-Empress was burning with anxiety. After discussing, they decided to let her out of the palace to relax. As expected, she came to confide in Yu Xiang at the first opportunity. The 9th princess looked around. Seeing that there was no one nearby, she moved closer to Yu Xiang. She pulled open her collar and said softly, I've been in a lot of pain here recently. It's swollen and uncomfortable. I don't even dare to move when I sleep. Can you help me take a look and see if there are any ulcers? I've been applying safflower oil every day, but it's not working at all. It's getting worse. The 9th princess didn't know what was going on, but she knew that this place was very embarrassing. She didn't even allow palace maids to wait on her when she bathed every day. She hurriedly washed up and wrapped herself in her undergarments before burrowing into bed. Then she would hide under the blankets and secretly rub. As she rubbed, she cried. The scene was very miserable. She finally managed to get a bottle of safflower oil to apply, but it didn't work at all. Instead, it made that place burn with pain and swell even more than before. She became even more afraid to tell outsiders. The moment she left the palace, she hurriedly came to find Yu Xiang. Yu Xiang looked inside her collar and saw that the 2 small lumps on her chest had already turned red and emitted a strong smell of safflower oil. Yu Xiang hurriedly turned her head to fan herself. As she fanned herself, she leaned on the stone table and laughed so hard that she almost rolled off the wheelchair. The 9th princess stared at her in panic. Even her breathing became lighter. My strange illness can be cured, right? No, it can't. Yu Xiang laughed so hard that she was panting. The 9th princess was so anxious that tears came out. She said in despair, Then how many days do I have left to live? How should I tell imperial father, imperial mother, imperial brother? Instinctively, she knew that she couldn't tell anyone about her illness in this place. Otherwise, why would she have to use a small doo-doo to cover it up since she was young? Wait, I'll talk to you after I catch my breath. Yuxiang waved her hand and laughed to herself for a while. Then she pointed to her chest and said, "Take a good look. Do you see the difference between us?" Go to my courtyard and have the servants prepare water for the princess to wash. She's probably feeling very uncomfortable right now. The two palace maids came to a sudden realization and a bit of laughter appeared in their eyes. So it was like this. No wonder Master was determined not to let anyone serve her. When they returned and told Her Majesty would definitely laugh to death. The ninth princess tightened her collar and her face flushed red. After washing off the burning safflower oil, the skin on her chest felt a bit cool. In the late spring and early summer it brought a bit of comfort. The ninth princess put on her undergarments and sighed in satisfaction. Yuxiang ordered Tao Hong to take out the clothes she wore when she was 12 or 13 years old. She picked out a few sets that she hadn't worn and spread them out on the bed for the ninth princess to choose for herself. The ninth princess bit her lip. She picked up one set and looked at it, then flipped and sniffed the other. She busied herself for a long time. If you want to choose clothes, then choose clothes. What are you sniffing? Do you think you're choosing pastries? Yuxiang put the 2 letters she had written into a pouch and handed it to the 2 palace maids. Smells so good. It's all your scent. The ninth princess giggled and nodded. She brushed the clothes to the side and said with a red face, "Lotus seed cake, are there any other clothes? As expected, you've grown up. You actually know how to care about your appearance. Back then you ate until your mouth was full of oil and didn't even wash your face. You directly went to the study to attend class. I wanted to help you wipe it, but you didn't let me. You said you wanted to save the oil for the next meal." Recalling those embarrassing events, Yuxiang couldn't stop laughing for a while. That was because there were rice grains stuck to my food. Imperial Father saw it and didn't let me wipe it. He said I could save it for the next meal. How old was I at that time? Naturally, I believed him. The ninth princess's cheeks were so red that blood could drip out. If a ladle of water was poured on her, white smoke would definitely come out of her head. These days she seemed to have suddenly grown up. She always pinched her chubby double chin in front of the bronze mirror and revealed a worried expression. However, no one could understand her worries. Not to mention Yuxiang, who was rocking back and forth with laughter. Even the 2 palace maids were shrugging their shoulders and trying hard to hold back their laughter. Yuxiang finally had enough of laughing. Only then did she order someone to open all her suitcases and let her choose for herself. The ninth princess didn't have time to worry about her blushing face. She picked and picked in the suitcases and finally took out a light purple dress. Yuxiang took a closer look. It was a long strapless dress that dragged on the ground and a translucent overshirt with 100 butterflies on it. Whether it was the style or the fabric, they were both very elegant. This dress was newly made. For the ninth princess who had just started to develop, it might be a bit too big for her and wouldn't be able to hold it up. Yuxiang didn't open her mouth to stop her. She just let her put it on. She forcefully pursed her lips, afraid that she would accidentally burst out laughing. With the help of the 2 palace maids, the ninth princess finally put on the dress. It was a long dress that dragged on the ground. It didn't matter if the hemline was long or short, but the area in front of her chest was very flat and empty. The excess fabric was wrinkled and twisted into a ball. It looked very funny. The ninth princess lowered her head and looked at herself. Then she glanced at the lotus seed cake. The little joy she had felt just now had completely disappeared without a trace. How could there be such a big difference between the same clothes? Yuxiang pointed at her chest with a serious expression. How about I stuff 2 steamed buns here to hold up the fabric? The ninth princess's eyes lit up. She clapped her hands and said, "Okay, that'll look much better. If I'm hungry, I can take them out to eat." Imagining the scene of a chubby girl taking out the small steamed buns in front of her chest and eating them, Yuxiang's face gradually distorted. Then, she leaned over the dressing table and hid her face in the crook of her arm. Her shoulders shook violently. The ninth princess was a bit flustered. She walked over and gently patted her. "Lotus seed cake, what's wrong with you? Why are you crying all of a sudden? Yu Xiang's shoulders shook even more violently. Tao Hong, Lu Lu, and the two palace maids had already run into the courtyard. They covered their mouths and turned around, shaking as if they were having cramps. The ninth princess looked at Yu Xiang and then looked at the maidservants outside the window. She became more and more helpless. What's wrong with you all? Are you sick? No, I'm fine. Yu Xiang took several deep breaths before she dared to raise her head. The corners of her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. She said seriously, "Little ball, the steamed buns will turn into a lump when pressed against your chest. It's very uncomfortable. Let's not stuff them into your mouth. This set of clothes is beautiful, but it's a bit big for you. I'll help you choose another set and put on some makeup. I guarantee that when you go out, everyone will say that you're beautiful." The ninth princess reluctantly pulled at the hem of her clothes. When she heard the last few words, her heart was moved. She stammered, "Really? Can I be as beautiful as you? Even more beautiful than me. You're a red flower, and I'm the green leaf to accompany you." Yu Xiang pinched her chubby hand. "No, we're both red flowers." The ninth princess refuted very seriously. Yu Xiang was very happy. She hugged her neck and swayed it left and right. Finally, she kissed her face several times. The west wing was full of laughter, but the main room was overcast with dark clouds. After Yu Miaoqi left their line of sight, she put down her hands that were covering her face. There were no tears in her eyes, only resentment. She walked back along the flat path. When she saw the marble slipway on both sides of the steps, she suddenly laughed sarcastically. In this Marquis Yongla, there were no small paths covered with gravel, only smooth and flat paths. Whenever she met a flight of steps, there would be a slipway. The middle section of the threshold of every room would be filled in. All of these tedious remodeling were done so that Yu Xiang's wheelchair could easily reach any place in the Marquis household. She didn't have legs, but she could move unimpeded in the Marquis household. She didn't have any blood relations, but she could win everyone's favor. She wasn't like herself. Her body was clearly healthy, and the same blood flowed in her veins, but she couldn't stand here. Why was this? And why? Yu Miaoqi walked up the steps step by step along the slipway. Her scratched palms were bleeding. Chapter 76. The Lin clan hadn't slept soundly for half a month. At this moment, she was lying on a soft couch and drinking medicine. When she saw her daughter enter, a trace of fear quickly flashed through her eyes. The Jean family's mangled appearance and her daughter's cold and ruthless face alternated in her mind. She gritted her teeth and whispered, "You're back? Did you see the ninth princess?" "I did." Yu Miaoqi casually picked up a stool and sat down. She took out a handkerchief to wipe the blood from her palms. The Lin clan was shocked when they saw this and hurriedly asked, "How did you get hurt? I'll have someone find a doctor for you right now." Yu Miaoqi casually wrapped the blood-stained handkerchief around her hand and shook her head. "This little injury is nothing. I can just apply some medicine for sore wounds. Thinking back to when I was locked up in the dungeon and tortured by Big Brother, my injuries were 100 or 1,000 times worse than this. Physical pain is a common occurrence for me. In any case, my life is worthless, so it doesn't matter." Hearing this, the Lin clan no longer remembered their previous fear and vigilance. They rushed to her side and examined her scarred hands. They were so distressed that they shed tears. If she hadn't suffered so much, how could her daughter have become like this? Even if she had committed a sin, it was the family Shan's sin. Yu Pinyon's sin and Yu Xiang's sin. What did it have to do with cheer? She was the biggest victim. "My child, it's been hard on you. Mother has let you down." She patted her daughter's back while sobbing. Yu Miaoqi was annoyed, but she didn't show it on her face. She comforted her. "Daughter is willing to suffer any more hardships to be reunited with mother. Don't cry. Quickly wipe your tears. Mother, they dote on Yu Xiang, so they loathe me. If this continues, I won't be able to stay in the Marquis household. Mother, I want to quickly get married and take you out." The Lin clan was extremely moved. She smiled with tears in her eyes. "My child, are you stupid? How could a mother and daughter leave the manor to live alone? No matter how badly Yandere treats me, he's still Master Ho, the heir of Prefecture Yu. He has to take care of me when I'm old and when I die. Look at how cold-hearted he is. Why would he take care of you in your old age and send you off when you die? I must marry a husband who is more powerful than him, so that he will be afraid of me. Only then will you have support in the Marquis household. If he doesn't want to acknowledge you, I'll acknowledge you. If he doesn't want to raise you, I'll raise you. I want you to live the rest of your life happily. Mother, what do you think? Yu Miaoqi hugged the Lin clan's neck and asked expectantly. The Lin clan was captivated by the big picture she had drawn. Her heart was filled with joy, and her heart, which was gradually dying, was filled with lush and verdant vitality. She stopped crying and nodded with a smile. Yu Miaoqi withdrew from her embrace and bluntly said, "Then mother should go dress up and take me to the Crown Prince mansion to attend the banquet." Go to the Crown Prince mansion to attend the banquet? The Lin clan was stunned. That's right. If you want to marry me off, shouldn't mother help me find a good family? Mother, daughter won't hide it from you. Daughter wants to marry the Crown Prince. Yu Miaoqi's tone was firm and calm, as if she was only talking about a trivial matter and not her marriage. Marry the Crown Prince? The Lin clan still hadn't regained their senses and could only repeat her words. That's right. Only by marrying the Crown Prince will I be able to contend against Yu Pinyin and protect myself and mother. But the Crown Prince already has an official wife. Don't tell me you want to be his concubine? How can my prefecture Yu's legitimate daughter be someone else's concubine? Moreover, the Crown Princess just gave birth to a pair of boy-girl twins who are favored by His Majesty. What kind of good life will you have if you marry him? The Lin clan had finally digested this shocking news and strongly opposed it. Does mother not know? Yu Miaoqi smiled unconcernedly. When the Crown Princess gave birth, the cold poison entered her body. Not only will it be difficult for her to have children, even her bones have been greatly damaged. Right now she's just enduring her days. I won't be anyone's concubine. I'll only be the official wife. When the Crown Princess passes away, based on Yu Pinyin's relationship with the Crown Prince, based on his overwhelming power, as long as the Crown Prince isn't stupid, as long as you tell the Empress about the marriage alliance, then the position of official wife will definitely be mine. Although she loathed Yu Pinyin, she had no choice but to use his power. This kind of humiliation deepened the hatred suppressed in her heart. How do you know that the Crown Princess doesn't have many years left to live? Where did you hear this from? The Lin clan refused to believe it. The imperial physicians of the Imperial Academy of Medicine take turns going to the Crown Prince mansion every day for a month. Recently, the Crown Prince's complexion has been dispirited, and he's always in a state of panic. The Crown Princess maternal family has also sent several outstanding beauties to the Crown Prince mansion to attend to the Crown Prince. Connecting all of this together, who can't guess the key point? Mother, don't ask anymore. The Crown Princess has already sent an invitation to the Prefecture Yu's womenfolk to attend the little imperial grandson's 1-month-old celebration. As the mistress of the household, you should bring a generous gift to visit. Yu Miaoqi's face gradually showed some impatience. Has the invitation already been sent? Why haven't I received it? The Lin clan was still hesitating. It was sent a long time ago. It's in Yu Xiang's hands. Hurry up. Be careful that old ancestor takes her away first and leaves us behind. Yu Miaoqi completely lost her patience. She pushed the Lin clan into a side room to change clothes and carefully dressed herself. Yu Xiang helped the 9th princess choose a form-fitting cloud and butterfly dress to wear. Then, she gave her a pink and tender peach blossom makeup. Her hair was tied into a bun with a butterfly hairpin on each side. When she walked, the butterfly wings would slightly flap, as if it would fly away in the next instant. The 9th princess was originally delicate and adorable. Now that she was dressed up, she looked even more like a porcelain doll, indescribably lively. She looked left and right in front of the mirror, then hugged Lotus Seed Cake's neck and laughed foolishly. Don't be so smug. It's almost time. Yu Xiang pinched the soft flesh on her cheeks. Only then did the 9th princess reluctantly leave the dressing table. In order to make the butterfly wings flap, she even skipped as she walked, causing the two palace maids to laugh the entire way. When they arrived at the main hall, the matriarch had indeed been waiting for a long time. She smiled as she paid her respects to the ninth princess. Then she checked the gift list and was about to leave. Just as she stepped out of the door, she saw the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi respectfully waiting at the front. Old ancestor, daughter-in-law has finished her preparations. Let's go. The Lin clan took a few steps forward and naturally supported the matriarch. Yu Miaoqi smiled at the ninth princess. This subject greets the ninth princess. The princess's attire is even more beautiful than the colorful butterflies in the sky. Who didn't like to hear nice words? The ninth princess blushed and humbly said a few words, but her small mouth was wide open and her face was filled with unconcealable joy. Yu Xiang could embarrass Yu Miaoqi in public, but he couldn't do the same to the Lin clan. He could only remain silent. Seeing this, the Lin clan was relieved and supported the matriarch as they walked towards the main entrance. The matriarch was someone who cared about face. The ninth princess and two palace maids were watching from the side. It wasn't good for her to chase them away, so she could only walk forward without saying a word. The crown princess had been bedridden this entire time, and didn't know that the servant girl who had been caught burning charcoal was the eldest daughter of the prefecture Yu's wife. After her illness had improved, she had instructed the imperial bodyguards to release the servant girl so as not to implicate the innocent. For the sake of his good friend and the girl's reputation, the crown prince kept this matter a secret. He also understood that Yu Miaoqi wasn't at fault, and specially sent many gifts to calm her nerves. The two masters were benevolent, but as a subordinate, he couldn't push his luck. It had only been a month since the incident. If he brought her to the crown prince mansion to make a fool of himself, wouldn't he be bringing bad luck to the crown princess for no reason? Moreover, Yu Miaoqi's fate was still the same. He didn't know if she would jinx anyone else. The matriarch walked slower and slower. Seeing that the main entrance was right in front of her, she finally grabbed the Lin clan's wrist. The Lin clan looked at her nervously, their eyes full of pleading. They were so eager to show their faces at the crown prince mansion. Was it because they saw that the crown princess was seriously ill that they had designs on the crown prince's second wife? She was still alive and well, so there should be a limit to her greed. The matriarch's chest was filled with anger. She wished she could use her walking stick to give the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi a good beating. The ninth princess and Yu Xiang, who had already walked out of the main entrance, turned their heads to look at them. The matriarch smiled and waved her hand at the two. Princess, please take my granddaughter and leave first. I left something behind and have to go back to get it myself. The ninth princess didn't suspect anything. She pulled Yu Xiang's sleeve and hopped towards her luxurious carriage. Yu Miaoqi automatically followed, as if she didn't see the matriarch's gaze that was hinting for her to stay. The ninth princess got on the carriage first and opened her arms with a smile. Lotus seed cake, come on in. I'll catch you. Be careful of your heart and feet. Be careful of your elbows. Yu Xiang repeatedly agreed. After getting on the carriage, she immediately hugged Xiaoqiu and kissed her fiercely twice. The ninth princess also kissed her twice and giggled. The two of them were happily hugging each other when they saw a palace maid supporting Yu Miaoqi onto the carriage. Because the matriarch said, "Take my granddaughter and leave first," but didn't say which granddaughter it was, the palace maid naturally thought that she was taking both of them. Yu Miaoqi was also a thick-skinned person. She knew that the matriarch wouldn't make things difficult for her in front of the ninth princess, so she took advantage of this loophole and followed closely. At this time, the matriarch was forcefully pinching the Lin clan's wrist. Two balls of anger burned in her eyes as she glared at Yu Miaoqi, who had already boarded the carriage. Yu Miaoqi acted as if she didn't see anything. She lowered the curtain and said with a smile, "It's already the end of spring and the beginning of summer. The sun is a bit hot. It's better to lower the curtain so that the princess's delicate skin won't get sunburned." The two palace maids also felt that the sun was too harsh. They lowered the curtain on the other side of the carriage, and then bent their backs as they walked out. They boarded the next carriage with Tao Hong and Lu Lu. Yu Xiang looked through the gap in the curtain and saw the matriarch expressionlessly saying something. The Lin clan seemed to be supporting her, but in reality, they were being restrained. Their faces turned from red to white, then from white to purple. It was very interesting. It was obvious that the matriarch wasn't saying anything good. The carriage slowly moved. Only then did Yu Xiang withdraw her gaze. She took out a plate of pastries from a hidden compartment and placed it on a small table. The 9th princess picked up a piece in each hand. She ate the one in her left hand and fed the one in her right hand to the lotus seed cake. She had a satisfied expression and didn't say anything to Yu Miaoqi. Yu Miaoqi obediently sat in a corner of the carriage and didn't say much. After Yu Xiang finished eating the pastries, she declined Xiao Qiu'er's offer to feed her again. She raised her chin at Yu Miaoqi and said with a contemptuous smile, "Older sister, what's the next line of, when the water is too clear, there will be no fish?" Yu Miaoqi hesitated for a moment before answering. The next line is when a person is too perceptive, he will have no friends. This line meant that if a person was too shrewd, they would lose their friends. Yu Miaoqi couldn't help but suspect that Yu Xiang was secretly mocking her. But in the next moment, she understood that Yu Xiang's mouth was far more vicious than any weapon in the world. "Older sister, you're wrong. It's when a person is too shameless, he will be invincible." Yu Xiang covered her mouth and chuckled. She slowly said word by word, in layman's terms, when a person is shameless, he will be invincible. "Older sister, you're already invincible. Congratulations, congratulations." She clasped her hands together and looked indescribably delicate and cute. But in Yu Miaoqi's eyes, she was no less than the most ferocious-looking malicious spirit. The 9th princess, who was eating pastries, suddenly burst out laughing. She patted the small table and praised, "This line is very interesting. When the water is too clear, there will be no fish. When a person is too shameless, he will be invincible. When a person is shameless, he will be invincible. How fitting. Lotus seed cake, you're too talented." Yu Miaoqi rubbed her chest and silently swallowed the blood that had already surged to her throat. Chapter 77. Because the crown princess was unwell, the full moon banquet wasn't held on a large scale. She only sent invitations to the family she was familiar with and a few princes. The rest of the officials were sent away with gifts. When the 9th princess and her entourage arrived, the banquet hadn't started yet. The crown princess was receiving people from her maternal family in the inner chambers. The 9th princess ignored the palace servants' attempts to stop her and led Yu Xiang inside. Yu Miaoqi was left alone outside the hall. The crown princess' voice sounded very weak. It was clear that the rumors about her illness weren't just empty rumors. Her mother couldn't hear what she said clearly. Her mother began to sob quietly and choked out, "Then we'll do as you say. We can't let the two children suffer." The 9th princess skipped in. The two hurriedly wiped their tears and greeted each other with a smile. Yu Xiang wasn't as tactless as her mother. She had already ordered Tao Hong Lulu to push her wheelchair outside and wait quietly. "Imperial sister-in-law, today is a joyous day. Why are you crying?" The 9th princess looked down and stared at her red eyes. The crown princess turned her face to avoid her. She also turned her face away. The two sisters-in-law chased each other around for a while. Gradually, happiness appeared on their faces. The crown princess mother felt much better when she saw this. She got up and left. When she saw Yu Xiang, she smiled and went up to chat with her. The crown princess heard Yu Xiang's sweet voice and hurriedly called out, "Xiang'er is also here? Come in quickly." One of the two girls was her joy and the other was her little lucky star. She loved both of them. After exchanging some simple greetings, the crown princess sent someone to bring in pastries. Seeing that her sister-in-law was busy eating, she looked towards Yu Xiang and asked gently, "Xiang'er, are you familiar with my three younger sisters? What do you think of their personalities? I'm afraid my body won't make it. I'm always thinking of finding a way out for my children." Her illness was getting worse by the day. Not only were her legs so sore that she couldn't move, her lower abdomen was constantly leaking lochia. If she couldn't stop the lochia, she might die of blood loss one day. However, her children were still young and were a thorn in the side of all the princes and descendants. How to let her children grow up safely had become a worry that she couldn't get rid of. Probably because she had received Yu Xiang's dragon phoenix divination before she gave birth, she had an inexplicable sense's feelings. Otherwise, she wouldn't have said such private things. That's right, just as the rumors said. She planned to choose one of her 3 younger sisters to be the crown prince's second consort. She had already informed the emperor and empress. For the sake of the heir-grandson's safety and to keep the Empress Dowager's maternal family in check, the Emperor and Empress Dowager had already acquiesced. Yu Xiang didn't go out often, but because she took care of the Fu's affairs and because her brother's eyes and ears were everywhere, she was familiar with all the noble ladies in the capital. However, in front of the crown princess, she couldn't make too many comments about her sisters. If she said it well, it would be flattery, but if she said it poorly, it would be slander. She thought for a moment and said bluntly, "I'm not familiar with them, so I can't say whether they're good or bad. However, I know that people are selfish and can't place their hopes on others. But I'm afraid my body won't make it past half a year." The crown princess smiled bitterly. She rolled up her sleeves and showed her arms that were as thin as withered branches. After giving birth, the grand doctor had clearly said there weren't any major problems. Who would have thought that she would die a month later? The heavens had given her a pair of children but took away half of her lifespan. It was indeed very fair. She didn't have anything to complain about. She just wanted to arrange everything for her children before she died. "Dr. Piao," Yu Xiang said with her brows furrowed. The crown princess smiled even more miserably. "When I got smallpox when I was 8 years old, I used up one of my chances to be diagnosed. Even the imperial physicians are at a loss." Yu Xiang fell silent. At this moment, the matriarch walked in under the guidance of a palace maid. She was holding a vermilion plant that looked like a coral and a tree. The matriarch bowed to the crown princess and placed the plant at the head of the bed. She said with a smile, "This is exorcism grass. It's a plant that comes from the southern seas. It's said to be able to dispel illness and make people healthy. However, no one in the southern seas has ever managed to grow it. It's just a legend." Xiang'er found a bag of seeds and scattered them all. Only one plant survived. "Not only does it look good, it also smells good. I'm sending it to the crown princess. I hope you can recover soon." The vermilion plant emitted a sweet fragrance that refreshed the heart. The crown princess's throbbing temples immediately calmed down. She thanked the matriarch with a smile. Because she couldn't bear to see the 2 young ladies get over their illness, she ordered Song Mama to bring them outside to play with the other noble ladies. After the 2 left, they didn't walk towards the crowded back garden. Instead, they walked along a small path to a quiet pavilion and prepared to have a private chat. Just as they sat down, they heard footsteps slowly approaching. The 2 turned their heads and met a pair of long and narrow eyes. The 9th princess's cheeks flushed red. She didn't know what to do. The person who came was also very surprised. His eyes revealed excitement, but he quickly restrained it. He bowed and prepared to leave. Don't go." The 9th princess stood up and shouted anxiously. That person was also reluctant. When he heard this, he immediately stopped and a faint smile appeared on his face. Yu Xiang frowned slightly. "Princess, why do you want him to stay? This is the back garden. He's just an outsider who trespasses into the back garden. If he offends any noble, can he bear the responsibility?" After saying this, he looked at the unusually handsome youth and sternly reprimanded. "The princess is magnanimous and won't bicker with you. Why don't you hurry up and get lost?" Shun Yuanqi pursed his lips and pointed to a courtyard door not far away. Reporting to the princess, "You'll enter the front garden after you pass through that corner door." He then pointed to a small building behind the pavilion and bowed. "That's the crown prince's study. It's only 500 meters away from here. Therefore, this place is already the boundary of the front garden. This humble subject didn't expect the princess and Miss Yu to be resting here. If there's any conflict, please forgive this humble subject." Yu Xiang had only been to the crown prince mansion a few times. How could he remember the layout of the mansion? He looked at the 9th princess with an inquiring gaze. The 9th princess's heart and eyes were filled with the youth's handsome face, his gentle smile, and his deep voice. At this moment her cheeks were flushed and her mind was in a mess. How could she receive her question? He could only smile foolishly. When the 9th princess was 6 years old, she had run to the throne room to find her imperial father while crying. She was a person who ran amok in the palace. Who would dare to stop her in the crown prince mansion? When the manservant guarding the door saw that the people who came were the 9th princess and Miss Yu, he hurriedly dodged and pretended that he didn't see them. This caused the misunderstanding. Yu Xiang understood. Seeing that Yuan Lang was still bowing and waiting for punishment, there was no need to mention how embarrassed he felt. After a moment of silence, he covered his mouth and laughed. Lord Shun, please rise. Just now we were just playing around with the Lord Shun. Please don't blame us. What a stubborn duck. Shen Yuanqi almost laughed out loud. He lowered his head and restrained himself for a moment before saying that he didn't dare. She was clearly worried that he would be caught by the imperial bodyguards for trespassing into the backyard, but she pretended to be fierce and reprimanded him so that he could escape. Her personality was still so awkward and cute. Thinking of this, his mood became more and more cheerful. His eyes, which had always been dark and gloomy, were now very bright. The 9th princess finally regained her senses. She waved her little chubby hand and shouted, Lord Shun, come here. I'll treat you to chestnuts. These are sugar-fried chestnuts made by the Imperial Kitchen chef using a secret method. They're very fragrant. As she spoke, she took out a few round, big and shiny chestnuts from her pouch. Shen Yuanqi didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this coaxing tone. If it was in the past, he would have already apologized and left. Now that Yu Xiang was also here, he was very reluctant to leave. While he was still struggling in his heart, he had already stepped into the pavilion. By the time he regained his senses, he had already sat down. The 9th princess was unable to contain her joy. She personally peeled a bright yellow chestnut and handed it over. Shen Yuanqi hurriedly thanked her and took it. In terms of shamelessness, Yu Xiang wasn't inferior to Yu Miaoqi. At this time, she had already shaken off her awkwardness and asked with a smile, His Highness the Crown Prince and the other princes are all in the front hall. Why did you run here instead of currying favor with them? Shen Yuanqi's heart was slightly moved. He bluntly said, Miss, you must have already heard that I was originally a servant of the Shui estate and not the heir of a noble family. With my background, it's best that I don't sully the noble's eyes. I'm actually more comfortable hiding here. So the rumors on the streets were true. Yu Xiang nodded in realization. The 9th princess saw that he had hidden here all alone and for some reason, she felt very sad. The rims of her eyes gradually turned red. Yu Xiang caught a glimpse of her expression from the corner of her eyes. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she said, Even the Lord Shen doesn't think anything of it, so what are you sad about? The divine ancestors' era's great General Feng was an imperial servant. The awe-inspiring deep-sea envoy was a eunuch. The great ancestors' left Prime Minister official Lin was once a tortoise slave. In one breath, she listed 7 or 8 prominent officials who were of lowly birth. She joked, when it comes to our great Han dynasty's 10 great inspirational ministers, the Lord Shen isn't even on the list. His background needs to be more tragic. The 9th princess's eyes weren't red anymore, and she didn't feel so sad anymore. Shen Yuanqi forcefully pursed his lips to restrain the smile that was constantly rising in his heart. The lass's method of comforting people was always so unique. Yu Xiang took a chestnut from the 9th princess's hand and threw it into her mouth. She smiled and said, The people of the world all say that the Lord Shen is of lowly birth and can't be of great use. However, they don't know that being of lowly birth also has its benefits. Today, who can enter the Crown Prince mansion to attend the banquet isn't an important person. For a small official like Shen Zhuangyan, let alone attend the banquet, I'm afraid he won't even be able to touch the door. Since he has gained the favor of His Highness the Crown Prince and the Emperor, the Lord Shen's official path will be smooth sailing. Shen Yuanqi smiled but didn't say anything. However, he sighed in his heart. Sure enough, she was Shen Yuanqi's younger sister. Her vision was much higher than Yu Miaoqi's. Yu Miaoqi thought that spreading his background would ruin his official career. How could she know that the emperor placed him in such an important position because of his background? Now, the nobles in the capital all avoided him like a snake or scorpion. There was no news of those who originally planned to marry into the Shui family. The emperor intended to isolate him. As a result, wouldn't the emperor be more assured to use him as a lonely official without any background? The crown prince, who had always been of one mind with the emperor, would naturally give him preferential treatment. Right now he seemed to be down and out, but in fact, his future would be smooth sailing. In the end he had to thank Yu Miaoqi. The 9th princess was completely relieved after hearing these words. She stuttered as she talked to the Zhuangyuan. Chapter 78. Shen Yuanqi had always been a tactful and shrewd person. Now that his sister, whom he missed day and night, was by his side, he naturally put all his energy into dealing with her. In just a moment the two girls became familiar with him. Yu Xiang listened to him talk about his past as a slave in the Shui family. She clicked her tongue in wonder and asked, "Do you have 10 taels of silver?" Shen Yuanqi reached for the pouch and softly said, "Of course I do." He didn't feel that there was anything wrong with the girl, whom he had only met twice, asking for money from him. Yu Xiang covered her face and said, "Didn't you say that when you became rich, you would throw the money back at me? I didn't expect that it would come true. Throw it back. I, Yu Xiang, am not a villain who goes back on her words. Moreover, the money was originally mine. There's no reason for me not to ask for it back. The most satisfying thing in the world is to be smashed by money. Throw it back. As long as you don't smash my face, I can bear it even if it's 100 taels more." Shen Yuanqi stared blankly for a moment, then immediately burst out laughing. Such a mischievous and carefree little girl was his biological sister. She was 1,000 times cuter than he had imagined. Why did the heavens have to play tricks on people? They made her leave the family Yu and sent that jinx to the family Shen. If it wasn't for this, their family would be living very happily right now. As he laughed, a deep bitterness seeped out of his eyes. Yu Xiang seemed to have sensed something, but the 9th princess propped up her chin and stared at the scholar's extremely handsome smiling face as if she was intoxicated. Just at this moment, a low and deep voice sounded, "Lord Shun, His Highness the Crown Prince is looking for you." Several people turned their heads to look back with different expressions. The 9th princess and Shen Yuanqi were inexplicably reserved, but Yu Xiang was pleasantly surprised and called out, "Brother." Yu Pinyin stepped forward to greet the 9th princess, then stared at his sister and asked, "Xiang'er and the Lord Shun have known each other for a long time?" "Yes, the Lord Shun fell under my wheels and was almost crushed to death. I gave him 10 taels of silver to get over the shock." In order to leave some face for the scholar, Yu Xiang vaguely described the suicide incident. Shen Yuanqi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Yu Pinyin's wheelchair turned around and pushed her wheelchair in the corner. In order to avoid encountering other men at night, the 9th princess, in order to avoid offending her, of the 9th, the Lord and us out in Mississippi. Yu Xiang nodded obediently and left with the 9th princess, who was reluctant to part with her. Yu Pinyin watched the two of them walk away, then turned back to look at Shen Yuanqi. His eyes were very sharp. "What did you say to Xiang'er?" "I didn't say anything that I shouldn't say. Commander Yu, please rest assured." After a pause, Shen Yuanqi couldn't help but ask, "Commander Yu, you said that you would send my sister home. How long do you have to wait?" Yu Pinyin looked at him deeply and walked forward. "After Xiang'er reaches her marriageable age." Shen Yuanqi followed closely and asked, "Why do you have to wait until after her marriageable age?" He couldn't wait any longer. She can get married when she reaches her marriageable age. Naturally, you have to wait until after that. Yu Pinyin smiled ambiguously. Shen Yuanqi frowned and thought deeply. Yu Miaoqi was thrown into the side hall by the 9th princess. Because she was the legitimate daughter of Marquis Yongla, the crown princess' 3 sisters were very kind to her. The young girls gathered together to talk about makeup, rouge and face powder. The atmosphere was very harmonious. The crown princess's maternal family was the Min family of Tsongshui. they had produced 4 imperial tutors. The crown princess's grandfather had taught the emperor and the crown prince. Although he had retired and the crown princess's father was only a second-rank scholar of the Hanlin Academy, the Min family's status was very high. It was also because of this that the 3 young ladies of the Min family were all magnanimous and noble people. The youngest and most beautiful one even faintly considered herself the master. From the guests to the servants, they were all very well taken care of. Yu Miaoqi looked at her coldly. She had already guessed her thoughts. Was she planning to inherit the crown princess's last wish and become the crown prince's second wife? She was really stupid beyond cure. The crown princess had already given birth to a pair of children. How could she not think for her children? She would definitely trick her younger sister into drinking sterilization medicine before she died. Then, she would make the other party willingly raise a pair of children for her. Disaster had already befallen them, but these people were still complacently dreaming. Yu Miaoqi lowered her head and took a sip of hot tea. She smiled contentedly. Regardless of whether the crown princess had this idea or not, as long as she spread the news, her sisters would be able to make a fuss. Other than the Min family's daughter, who else in the entire Great Han dynasty was more suitable to be the crown prince's first wife? Naturally, it was the younger sister of the crown prince's study companion, Commander Yu. If the crown prince wanted to smoothly ascend the throne and sit on the throne, it was impossible for him not to rope in Yu Pinyin. Yu Miaoqi was deep in thought when she saw a tall, tanned young girl step into the side hall and look around. The 3 Min sisters hurriedly greeted her with smiles. Jiao Jiao has arrived. Quickly sit. Such a sturdy figure with thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a heroic spirit. If he wasn't wearing women's clothing, one would almost think that he was a son of some family, but he just had to be called Jiao Jiao. Yu Miaoqi lowered her head and used her handkerchief to cover the mocking smile on her lips. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw that many noble ladies were also unable to restrain their laughter and had mocking gazes. Of the 3 Min sisters, the eldest was called Min Song, the second was called Min Ji, and the youngest was called Min Lan. Because the crown princess was seriously ill, the 3 of them were entrusted to take care of the womenfolk. Although the eldest sister and second sister didn't have much interaction with Fan Jiao Jiao, they didn't look down on her. On the other hand, Min Lan's smile was very stiff. She was bashful, and her noble aura was completely washed away. She was no longer as graceful as before. Fan Jiao Jiao was a straightforward person. When she saw Min Lan, her face immediately darkened. She automatically picked up a stool and sat down, asking, "Where are the 9th princess and Xiang'er? How come I don't see them?" Min Song ordered someone to serve her tea and said warmly, "When they saw older sister crown princess, they went to play by themselves. Right now I don't know where they're hiding. Don't worry. When the banquet starts, they'll naturally return." There was less than an hour left before the banquet. When she thought about how she had to feign civility with this group of delicate noble ladies, Fan Jiao Jiao felt as if ants were crawling all over her body. She was extremely uncomfortable, and her already tanned skin seemed even darker. She looked around and pointed at Yu Miaoqi next to her, asking, "Which family's young lady is this? Why does she look so unfamiliar?" If she was suitable, she would use her to pass the time. "This is Yu Xiang's older twin sister. She's a secular disciple of Reverend Liao Kong. She just returned home after crossing her calamity." Min Ji explained softly. Min Lan sat at the head of the table. She perked her ears to listen to their conversation while dealing with the other noble ladies. She looked just like the master of the household. Fan Jiao Jiao stared at Yu Miaoqi with wide eyes. She swept her eyes from top to bottom, her gaze extremely impudent. Yu Miaoqi felt displeased, but at the same time she felt a bit uneasy. To be able to be on good terms with Yu Xiang, this person definitely wasn't someone easy to get along with. As expected, Fan Jiao Jiao immediately opened her mouth in a tiger-like voice. "Is this really Xiang'er's older twin sister? Why does she look so ugly? Could it be that there's been a mistake?" Her voice was loud and clear to begin with. In her shock, she raised her voice by several decibels. Not to mention the noble ladies in the side hall, even the crown princess and the other noble ladies in the main hall heard her clearly. The noble ladies all covered their mouths to stifle their laughter. A few of them were even caught off guard and burst into laughter. Yu Miaoqi wanted nothing more than to dig a hole in the ground and crawl into it. Min Song was slightly taken aback. When he came back to his senses, he hurriedly tried to smooth things over. There are also twins who don't look alike. Official Wang's two youngest sons are one such example. Moreover, second Miss Yu is so elegant and beautiful. If she can be considered ugly, then how can we, the average person, live? Fan Jiaojiao heard her mother coughing next door, and knew that she had caused trouble again. She tried to salvage the situation by saying, "She's actually not ugly. It's just that compared to Xiang'er she looks ugly. I made a mistake just now. If you compare goods, you'll throw them away. If you compare people, you'll die. You might as well not explain at all." The hall burst into laughter one after another. Even Min Song, who had always been reserved and steady, couldn't help but smile. Yu Miaoqi's cheeks had already turned purple, but there was still a forced smile hanging on her lips. Her upper teeth were clenched tightly together, and a faint taste of blood spread in her mouth. She really wanted to yell at the top of her lungs and tell everyone that she was Marquis Yongla's true legitimate daughter. Yu Xiang was just a bastard, a lowly daughter of a merchant family. But as soon as this thought appeared in her mind, she firmly suppressed it. She knew that she couldn't say this. In this lifetime, Yu Xiang had to be her twin sister, Marquis Yongla's legitimate daughter. Denying Yu Xiang was the same as denying herself. Destroying Yu Xiang was the same as destroying herself. Yu Miaoqi was suffering in the abyss of suffering. Just as she was about to reach her limit, the sound of a wheelchair turning came from outside the door. The laughing noblewomen immediately fell silent and pretended to chat with their companions. Even the arrogant Minlan couldn't help but reveal a look of fear. They all knew that Yu Xiang had an extremely protective personality. She could bully her own people as much as she wanted, but she wouldn't allow anyone else to bully her in the slightest. But this time everyone guessed wrong. Yu Xiang and Yu Miaoqi weren't on the same side. They were mortal enemies. "What are you talking about? Why are you laughing so happily?" A clear and sweet voice drifted in along with the rich fragrance of flowers. "Nothing much. I'm just saying that your older sister doesn't look like you." Fan Jiaojiao hurriedly ran up and took the wheelchair from Tao Hong's hands and pushed it forward. She was afraid that her ugly words about Yu Miaoqi would be exposed by others. "She looks like my mother and I look like my brother. What's so strange about that?" Yu Xiang glanced at Yu Miaoqi, whose face had turned purple. She didn't hit her when she was down. In the Marquis household, in front of the simple the ninth princess, she could say whatever she wanted. But in front of these noblewomen, she wouldn't let them see Marquis Yongla as a joke. Min Song repeatedly agreed and took the lead to salute the ninth princess. The rest of the noblewomen hurriedly gathered around and respectfully bowed in greeting. The ninth princess had never liked crowds. She waved her hand and hid behind Yu Xiang and Fan Jiaojiao. Yu Xiang pulled her out and pushed her forward. She looked at Min Lan, who was pouting, "What delicious food, drink or fun things are there? Hurry up and bring them to the ninth princess. Didn't Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort entrust you with receiving guests today? Hurry up and bring out the tea and pastries." Min Lan pointed at a palace maid and shouted. In the end, she moved the ninth princess to the main seat and asked softly, "Princess, let's play Huarong Dao?" Before the ninth princess could speak, Fan Jiaojiao refused in a low, muffled voice, "No, you can't afford to lose. You still haven't paid back the 200 taels of silver you owed last time." Min Lan's face instantly flushed red. This made Yu Miaoqi feel much better. She secretly sneered. "It's said that birds of a feather flock together." These words are indeed very reasonable. Yu Xiang had a poisonous mouth, and her friends could also choke people to death with just one mouth. Yu Xiang narrowed her eyes and smiled. She lazily said, "It's fine if you want to play, but you have to increase the stakes. 100 taels of silver for each loss. Do you dare?" You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.